Bobby, we need to have a talk about this World of Warcraft Classic. Do I look like I know what a WoW token is?
All right, guys, here is where we're going to talk about all the tanks in Wrath. And we're going to go through each tank, but we're going to start off with just some overall tank changes. I don't know all of the overall tank changes, but there were quite a few from Classic to TBC. And this is the part where we're just going to talk about the changes that will affect most, if not all, of the tanks. So first off, like I'm gonna leave it to you guys to jump in. Like, where do you want to start? What was some of the overall changes to just the way tanking works in Wrath? I'm gonna let you guys take it, and I'm gonna be right back.
So most most importantly, Blessing of Salvation is now gone. Tanks were given basically an inverse of Blessing of Salvation, so that in Wrath, basically everyone is operating with Blessing of Salvation. So you get the same threat differential that you like with Blessing of Salvation, but you don't need to have a Paladin that buffs you with it. So that's probably the biggest change. Obviously, tank threat is a huge problem in Burning Crusade, and they negate a lot of that with that one change in Wrath. Tank threat is just overall, even discounting that, it's still up a fair bit. So tank threat is just so much better in Wrath. And from a defensive standpoint, crushing blows go away. So now all the gearing surrounding crushing blows changes. Those are probably the two biggest things. I don't know if you guys have anything else to add.
Yeah, you can hop in.
Yeah, crushing blows is kind of the big one for me, like you were talking about, because it definitely changes the way you gear. It makes it a lot more friendly for people. Same thing with the threat changes as well. So I think it's really important that people understand that, because a lot of people will ask me about uncrushable, avoidance cap, etc. I do think there's another thing too to kind of factor in. This will not be as important in the first phase, but it becomes more and more important later. And that's that there are now mitigation diminishing returns. So parry, dodge, chance to be missed, etc. All these things become worse and worse the more you have of it. Whereas before, that shit was getting better and better. That's why they had to introduce the nerf of Sunwell Plateau Radiance to take away avoidance. It wasn't that people were like reaching 100% avoidance or anything like that. It was also that for like just an example off the top of my head, if I get you 25% avoidance, right, and you have 1,000 HP, right, you're expected to take 750 damage, right? It lowers your damage taken from 1,000 to 750, right? When you have 25%. If you go from 50% dodge to 75% dodge, you were supposed to be taking 500 damage, and now you're taking 250. So the first 25% brings me from 1,000 to 750, and then third 25% takes me from 50 to 25, or 500 to 250, which is essentially having your damage at that point. If I'm supposed to take 500 damage and now I'm taking 250, I just have the damage I was going to be taking by just adding 25% more dodge when I already had 50%, right? So effectively, avoidance was better and better the more you had of it. It's just like armor penetration. The closer you get to approaching 0, the better each point is getting. But now avoidance has diminishing returns to avoid that, to stop it, so that at the end of the game, they have to introduce these obscure mechanics like Sunwell Radiance. So stacking mitigation and the way you're going to gear some of your characters may not be as intuitive as it once was. So like, for example, for DKs, parry, they already get parry from getting strength. So parry rating might not be worth as much to them as dodge rating, because they're already getting so much parry from having extra strength. So things like that are going to be a factor that you have to think about when you're gearing your characters in the future, and when you start stacking a lot more avoidance.
Okay, so
another thing that I just remembered is that every tank has much better cooldowns in Wrath. So right now, basically, warriors are the only ones with cooldowns and a long cooldown shield wall. and a semi-long cooldown in Last Stand. Now every tank gets cooldowns, multiple cooldowns, and those cooldowns are much shorter. So I think Shield Wall becomes a 5-minute cooldown, maybe 2 minutes with the glyph or something like that.
You had to glyph and talent it, yes.
Yeah. Last Stand is much shorter of cooldown. Like Druids get bark skin in forms, Paladins get a defensive mitigation cooldown. So just everyone has mitigation cooldowns to use.
Well, and you have to use them too. So like
Yes.
in TBC, I mean, if your guild was good, you could play Prot Warrior and just take Last Stand and Shield Wall off your bar, to be honest, because you there's not a fight where you need those things until like Brutalis. There's very few times you're proactively pressing defensives, except like Illidan in Rage and Brutalis, like if you know something's going wrong. But most things you could have just taken them off your bar, and if everything goes right, you would have lived. So it's less of like I'm going to wait and try and think of the best time to use this cooldown. And in Wrath, it's almost more like planning, right? You're like,
yes,
okay, we know the tank is going to get owned, right? He's got a defensive here. Somebody's got to cover this next, opening where he has no defensive. And that's when we talk about the different tanks, knowing when they're the cooldown of their defensives, how strong their defensive is, and what it can protect them from is important, because you need to coordinate with like healers, right? Does the tank need a sacrifice? Do they need something like pain suppression is probably the biggest one.
Spirit.
Yeah, you got to plan instead of rather just like randomly panic pressing. You can still do that, but it's just different.
Dude, I was doing a bunch of Nax runs and stuff like that, and then I played with Fark, who's a private server Paladin player and tank player and raid leader, and he was just like, okay, sacrifice, put up sacrifice, and it's like next person sacrifice. He's calling sacrifice. I'm like, dude, I tanked this with like literally no help in the past. Like private server players are like used to calling cooldowns in a row. But it's like not necessary right now in Nax and like Sartharian and stuff like that. It's like,
but it will be.
It seems like overkill. We don't like, that's the thing is like, we think it's going to be like that, but we can't know for sure about private server tuning versus how it was in ICC. Cause I don't remember that shit going on in my raids. Right?
Well, I think it depends on the guild.
Make it too, easier, like, obviously. Right.
In my guild, we're going to need to do that. Like, the guilds that are right now, like, maybe took a long time in Sunwell, maybe took at least a month. If your guild took at least a month in Sunwell, that's the kind of guild that you got to think of things differently when it comes to Wrath. You're the guild that actually needs to be playing safer. You need to be thinking more of like, how are we going to play the mechanics more as they're supposed to be played? Because everyone in the raid's typically going to be paying less attention, in less gear. That's where the plan matters more. And when we talk about tanks, this is one thing I think a lot of people have flipped about Protection Warrior too. A lot of people I keep hearing, they're like, oh, Prot Warrior, they're going to be, great in like a casual guild or something, because nothing matters in a casual guild. And I'm like, I would almost flip it to where like maybe if you're in a more top end guild, the survivability would maybe be less of an issue, maybe be more interested in some of the damage perks. In a, boomer guild, if you've got, kind of slow healers, I'm leaning towards a Paladin, a DK. Like I want to have the buttons to keep myself alive. So I would, keep that in mind when you're thinking of like the difficulty of the game. We are expecting it to get harder in Wrath. We don't know for sure. There's going to be some hard modes. But just because you're used to playing casually, don't just assume that means that you don't have the agency to, do something very helpful to carry the raid and think about, how you want to be playing, right? Because when we talk about the tanks, you have different choices. You're going to have a simple option. You're going to have a little bit more complicated, you're going to have room to choose what you want to do. And I think that's important to keep in mind. It does matter what you pick, but you ultimately still want to play what's fun.
Yeah.
I did want to mention like the whole, you were talking about using your cooldowns and basically cycling them and knowing what you're going to do. I think that's going to become a lot of the fun for some of the tanks, especially DKs later. And maybe even like phase 1 with Malygos Sartharian, where your cooldowns are very much so you're planning them, you're reacting to like DKs are, in my opinion, by far the best dragon tank in the game. They have the slowest attack speed out of all of the tanks because they're using a two-hander sometimes. Sometimes. And then the anti-magic shell is only a 45-second cooldown, and you can absorb breaths with it and react to breaths by pressing it. So there's very much so like tanks have different jobs that they're incredibly good at. And so it becomes a lot of fun And it also means that they this is where Blizzard kind of moved away from crushing blows was like a way to give bosses artificial difficulty by having random spikes in damage. Now bosses will spike you in damage, but it's more predictable and they have tank busting abilities, which is something that basically like Final Fantasy 11 uses all the time, or Final Fantasy 14 uses all the time. The other online one, where it's like instead of just having random shit happen to you, your tank has to be good enough to react to these things, and you can tell when he doesn't. Right, well, you can tell when he's taking spikes of damage that he should have reacted to in a certain way. So you'll be able to tell which tanks are or boomed out, like right away. Right away, you'll be able to tell which ones aren't able to actually press their buttons in reaction to a 1 second cast or a 1.5 second cast.
The most similar boss right now is Brutalis with this stomp ability, which is on a very specific timer and does close to lethal damage to a tank. Think in Wrath that those tank busters don't do most of your health, but rather more than your max health, and you need to use defensive cooldowns to mitigate that to a survivable level. And so your skill as a tank and as a healing core behind you and whoever else, do you have defensive cooldowns lined up so that you can survive every single one?
I don't want to scare people though. Like if we're talking like generally like the intro of tanking, I think tanking in Wrath is much easier than in TBC in a lot of ways. I think itemization, like just Zirene touched on it slightly. If you have somebody that doesn't understand TBC itemization, they can be basically useless. Like if you have a full like guy walks in, prot warrior, full mitigation, full dodge, and they're trying to tank like a Karazhan, attunement, he's going to have threat of neither the boss nor the horse. Like it's just gone because he doesn't realize that he's actually tankier than he needs to be, and he will not have any rage. Like it's going to be a disaster. I think that's a big problem Prot Warrior had all of TBC is it was just really hard to itemize.
Just wear arena gear. You have to wear arena gear the entire time.
Yep. But yeah, in Wrath, tanking is much easier dungeon wise. If you have a terrible tank, yes, you might need to tell him when to use his defensives or he might not press them. But that's actually probably better than the boss literally running everywhere 3 seconds into every pool, which is kind of what happens in TBC. If you have a bad tank, they're pretty much none of the three can really hold threat. Maybe a bear because it's pretty simple, but
bears start out at really bad threat levels though.
Well, true, but I think even a bad bear, you're still going to have threat issues even in like I think you'd still have threat issues. I think it's just pretty tough in TBC.
Yeah, don't get too much into each of the classes yet. But I've got
a rough overview. I'm just saying it's much easier to tank. You can get into tanking if you never tanked before, and it's not something that's actually that hard. So
that reminds me. One of the other grand changes that they do to tanks is your AoE and multi-target abilities now hit everything. It's not just paladins can AoE tank. Now everyone has the capability of doing AoE tanking. Maybe there's a class that's a lot better at one, but it's not that one tank is wholly insufficient to do any AoE tanking whatsoever.
Yep. Okay. Well,
I would never ever make a blood DK try to AoE tank. Just ever. That is their booty cheeks. They're so bad. They're so bad at that. Oh my God. It like literally when I was blood tanking, I was legit like, I'm just going to go frost. I'm just going to frost tank. I'm just going to wear the same gear and I'm just going to frost. This stuff is all over the place. Blood boil doesn't do much damage at all. It doesn't do much threat. Death and decay, long cooldown unless you have morbidity. Like that's all you got unless you're going to spread diseases. And even then that's still not enough to really hold threat. It's just, that's the only class that I think stands out to me. Only tank spec that stands out to me is really struggling in that arena.
But you're not donezo. You just might have to commit like 2 of your dual specs to like 2 tank specs. Like you don't have to, but I would probably go into like Naxxramas with a frost tank spec, mainly frost, deep frost still, and then a full blood spec early, which that's exactly might not be something you want to do.
Exactly what I'm doing for the stubborn tank part. If you're min maxing, you probably don't use a blood DK in Nax.
Yeah.
But it doesn't matter. Like it's easy enough.
All right. So I actually, you guys are so amazing. I don't normally have to do this, but I had to pull out my notepad just to make sure I didn't forget any of the things. The first off, the shout out to the prot warriors, and just to make Rugs mad. All right. second is the first thing that Corpse said is fascinating, because I did not realize that when they took salve away, they still put that bonus just on everybody, rather than it be 30% less threat for everybody else. It's just 30% more threat for, or roughly.
Yeah. I think it's like more 43% increase. It's exactly the inverse of salve. And so it's baked into your tank's stances. So bear form defensive stance with Righteous Fury active, and for DKs it's when Frost Presence is active.
Nice.
Different threat modifiers, yeah. I think the but I mean this was something that was already present. They just turned it up to a 10, right? Like rogues already did less threat than a hunter for the same amount of damage, just naturally, right? Like berserker stance, stuff like that. All these things had different threat multipliers on them. So they just turned it up. I think they also made it so some classes, like I think some of the classes that have tank specs, they made it so that they had like threat reduction talents at least available to them. Like Ret Paladin has it deep down. There is one in the beginning of Blood for some reason. I don't know why it's there exactly, but that the whole DK trees are kind of a mess, in my opinion, except for Unholy. Oh, yeah, but yeah, threat's not really that much of an issue.
Okay.
One thing I would say about threat in general, just quick, you might hear some people say threat is still real. Threat is still a thing. That is absolutely like speed. Well, that's like speed running. That's like speed running. And then specifically, I would say some ad phases of bosses. This is in my opinion. I don't think you're going to have threat, like a problem that is causing you to not kill a boss, unless you're like such a small percent away that you can't afford to like tricks tanks. Like 99% of guilds can just boomer tricks tanks, make sure your hunters are MDing. Threat should not be a factor. And for, again, most of you guys listening, you really want to focus on survivability, especially early, not threat. So that's the main thing I would say. You're going to hear some people still saying threat is still very real. It kind of is in AoE situations, but especially in single target, it's kind of not. I mean, it sort of matters. Some of the tanks have some, obviously a big variation between their threat, but holding it over the DPS is usually not ever going to be like stopping your progression. In worst case scenario, you have to move a tricks, worst case, your warlock's mad, he has to shatter, in Wrath, I still have to shatter, stuff like that.
Yeah. Well, as a rogue that used to get mad at the DPS that wanted me to tricks him on pull, I went all through Wrath. I tricks the main tank first, and then I tricks DPS after that, but always main tank first. But I play combat, so I don't know, like it was just a rule for me, because it meant for sure I was able to go ham right off the bat. And with the changes that are possibly coming to Warcraft logs, people aren't even like, only the full raid's going to care about you doing tricks properly, rather than the one asshole that just keeps on your ass and them tells like, come on, dude. So, okay. So the next,
what else? What else? So this is not completely like fully revealed. Like we'll do more of it on like beta and stuff. But everybody knows about the arms prop build that's going around for leveling, and there's an adaptation to it and things that allows you to use it in raid. And at least my guild's going to be using it in Nax, and tricksing them is like the highest DPS increase you could do, because they already do 6 to 8k damage on fights.
Save that for Prot, because I want to talk about that. They actually do
an insane amount of damage. It's stupid.
Sweet.
And if it's a cleave fight, like 4 horsemen, it's just disgusting.
Sweet. All right. So yeah, I've still got more. Okay. So first off, I want you to answer this, at least one of you, but answer this prior to answering the next part. But you talked about the Sunwell debuff on tanks, and I want you to explain that, because a lot of the casual people, I bet you 60 to 70% of players don't even know that was put in the game, even though we covered it on this podcast and everything. But the question I have is, so armor has always had diminishing returns. Like the higher you go, the less each point gives you per percent less damage taken. Is that what you're saying? Basically, is happening with dodge and parry and block.
Yeah.
Basically, yeah, the inverse kind of where it's like the more of it you have, the better it is. So it's the inverse, whereas it's armor penetration. The more armor penetration you have, the better it is, because your last 1,000 armor is worth way less than your first 1,000 armor. That's why you can mouse over like a character that has like 10k armor and it's like 45% damage reduction. And then if you have 30k armor, that's 73%. And you're just like, wait a second. I tripled the armor, but my damage reduction went up like only 30% or 32%. So like the first 1,000 is worth more than the last 1,000. But when it comes to armor pen, obviously, if you're taking armor away, your last bit of armor pen is worth more than your beginning one. So removing the last 1,000 armor off an enemy is going to be way more damage than your first 1,000 armor pen. Right?
But that's in TBC, right?
Like yes, that's in TBC. I mean, that's how armor is going to work the entire time, I believe. Yes. I believe it's the same way. Stacking. Yeah.
Really?
The more armor pen is worth more, the more of it you already have.
Even in Wrath.
Yes.
Yeah. So armor pen changes from a flat reduction of armor to a percent. So right now in TBC, it's more worthwhile on lower armor targets because it is really important to remove that last bit of armor, like to lower the target's armor to 0. Where in Wrath, it's more because it works on a percent. You are reducing a lot more armor when your armor pen is working on a plate target like a holy paladin rather than a clothy. So it makes more sense in a fantasy world to have armor pen be on a percent system, but the end result of the armor pen cap is much more important than the first bit of armor penetration you get, and that's true in TBC and Wrath.
Okay. Then just a comment about when Zirene was talking about private service calling out all these different abilities and stuff, and him not remembering that happening in Wrath. I was rating at the top end in Wrath, and I guess at that time I was ignorant of how knowledgeable each person in my raid was. The raid leader was calling certain things, but it must have been that just everybody knew exactly everything they could to know about their class and their job, that those things weren't needed to be called out. Because like we did Yogg 0, and we just had basically movement stuff called out. We never had anybody's actual what they needed to do called out ever. So I didn't even know what a warrior did, what a tank did, what a healer did. We had, different channels where, we had the rogue channel and then the DPS channel, and then the healers had the healer channel and stuff like that. They all talked about it within there, and their, class officers would tell them things, I'm assuming, because mine would tell me things. But it's just interesting how we've gotten to a point to where you could actually take skilled gamers in, and you could actually a raid leader can be so good that he can call everything. So I thought that was an interesting thing. It's kind of off point, but I just thought I would throw that out there. I thought maybe Zatar might have something to say, being a raid leader.
Your guild was so good, they didn't need to be told what to do. And maybe that was a pug thing, but I think it's fine for the raid leader to manage cooldowns like that. So I think that's a fine thing for a raid leader to do.
It's a very retail thing.
I think the only thing we had was Bloodlust was the only thing that was ever called.
Yeah.
There's different degrees to what to say. I don't like to have to say on Kill Jaden, there's meteors falling from the ground. If there's one around you, move.
That's what my raid leader says.
Yeah.
He's
I see two warlocks walking straight into a meteor. Please turn around. You don't want to say that, but.
He's like, we're on Kill Jaden. He's like, all right, guys, this is the ad phase. There's no other mechanics. You just have to watch for the spikes. Don't get hit by a spike. And then it comes out of this. Everybody, look at the floor. Are you standing in a meteor swarm? Look at the floor. Look at the floor. And I'm like, fuck, dude. Like, do they not have weak auras for this? Like, what the fuck are they doing? Like, I'm like, who actually doesn't have this shit? It's crazy.
I like how your solution was weak auras and wasn't just like paying attention.
I was just like not looking at that.
It's real.
Weak auras are the solution to all of life's problems.
At the same time, though, GTFO saves my ass a lot. If there's a lot of different things I am watching, sometimes I might be looking up to kill that orb that's in the sky, and I don't see something underneath me. I'm not, perfect. Like, there are times that things save me because I just forgot about that one mechanic. And I'm sure a ton of people are like me. Not everybody is like top end amazing, and there's less people coaching now. Like, there's less people willing to tell you, hey, dude, like right here, you could do this and it would save you so much. They'll just be silent and just like, nobody wants to speak up. Nobody wants to ask the dumb questions but that's a total side tangent. Yeah. The last thing is what Zatar said. Tanking becomes more fun. You have more buttons to hit at the right times. Do you feel like it becomes more like a as far as hitting buttons and doing things proactively, does it become more like a healer's job at the moment or more like a DPS job at the moment? Because it's probably more fun because threat was the main mechanic in TBC, right? And then 40-man raid was the main mechanic in classic. Is that what makes it more fun, is because now you're actually doing stuff a lot more often?
I would just say it's just more approachable. You're going to find, and probably more fun for the majority of the players. Like, I personally probably will have less fun in Wrath on a specific tank than like playing Prot Warrior. Because Prot Warrior in TBC is like, it's everything cranked to 1,000,000.
You're doing a ton.
Your items matter so much. Keeping everything up is really important. If you start slowly making errors in your rotation, you're going to start having a threat issue in 30 seconds. Yeah, it's just kind of everything really matters, which I think is really fun. But 99% of people are going to go into their first dungeon as a Prot Warrior, and they're going to make a Reddit post saying, am I doing something wrong? I didn't tank a single mob in our dungeon. And
then the 4 other people in the group are going to say, is this guy doing something wrong? He didn't tank a single mob in the dungeon. So it's like, it's not even just the Prot Warrior's enjoyment of the game. It's everyone else's, because the tank is the bottleneck of the raid.
Super bad.
Yeah.
Right?
How many DPS don't get to play their buttons because they're tank?
I know a lot of Fury Warriors that, like, it was something that I was like, man, I was thinking, like, I like TBC heroics. They're hard. You have to CC stuff. I like that it kind of takes a while. And then I talked to like a Fury Warrior and they're just like, it's miserable. What do you mean? I've never been able to do damage in like 95% of heroics I enter. I can't press my keys. Like, I'm just praying to have a really geared Paladin so I get salve. And, they have good AoE.
That's kind of the problem with them creating moves. Like, as a lock, like, if you're not able to seed, like, and in fact, I've been in so many different runs where it's a tough trash pack. The raid lead says, single target this first ad down. And I'm the only asshole that single targets the first thing down. All I'm hearing is
everyone
pop,
else is casting
pop,
seed.
Pop, pop. And then the things are running all over the place. And the other locks are freaking death coiling, making it even worse on the tanks. And it's just like, and I think that's just a problem with the move. And like, really in TBC, like, seed is only good if you have a Prot Paladin, and that's the problem. Same with cleave, although the warrior at least is mostly in plate now instead of in leather gear and stuff like that. So at least if they're quick, they can throw a shield on, which I do a ton in ZA GDKPs, Like, I throw a shield on constantly there because I'm taking aggro a ton if I want to go quick.
You're one of the few. I'll just say that. You're one of the few. A lot of Dead Fury warriors with dual wield weapons on the ground there, man.
Yeah, you know what taught me that?
Me?
Fucking, well, Corpse 1, but freaking world buffs. Like, you die like a good amount of times to trash, and you're like, I just died to trash. And you learn, I need a shield. Like, and I need to have this on a quick key that I can hit. Like, and it still isn't going to for sure save you. But I mean, you know, with buffs, what the cost of TBC, it's definitely worth that to have it on a macro. And then I have it whenever I go back to, like, when I go to defensive, it changes to sword and board. When I go back to berserk or arms, it goes right back to my, like, I don't even have to like think. I just have to change stance and boom, it's there. But yeah, it's interesting. All right, well, that was awesome, guys. You guys, like, I just put a couple, like, 2 little things in there of like how tanks change overall, and you guys destroyed that. All right, let's move on to the DK.
Had to hold back. Hold back there.
Oh, you held back? What did you hold back?
Yeah, because we're gonna spoil all these. We're gonna go into the nitty gritty of stuff.
Yeah. Because I mean,
no rabbit holes to jump down just yet.
I feel like if we jump from tank to tank, saying like these different things, it's gonna confuse people listening. You know,
I'm sure I've confused people like 5 times already.
Oh shit! But nobody described the tank debuff in Sunwell.
Oh yeah. Sunwell Radiance is a hidden debuff that when you're in Sunwell, everybody has 20% less chance to dodge and 5% less chance to be missed. And this was introduced because people were stacking avoidance in original TBC, and there were things where rogues were for fun tanking Mother or tanking Gruul, and they were like, druids are also becoming a problem too, and they just added this debuff in there because it was really hard to balance. And I'll say frankly, playing a class that has rage where you want to get hit, it's kind of welcome to actually get hit because otherwise, like when I wear the same gear that I do in Sunwell in BT, I'm just like, oh god, I just got to put on I literally have a like a PvP set that has 8% dodge, and then for context, my set that I actually use in Sunwell has like 28% dodge. The avoidance just is so different, but I want to get hit. So it's kind of a good thing and a bad thing. It almost saves us from ourselves, but it definitely saves the developers from people being able to tank bosses and take 0 damage. So
yeah, you could hit 100% dodge in Sunwell.
It
Druid and warrior.
It wasn't that a rogue tanked Gruul. A rogue has soloed Gruul. Because they can get to 100% avoidance.
Yeah, well, tanks can too with reasonable health behind it too. So you actually could have just walked up to a boss, and even if you do, get hit by a ability or something that goes through it, I mean, you could still tank things without
you can't do that now, right?
You can't because of the Sunwell Radiance, that extra 20%. And then
you said Gruul though.
Yeah. Gruul, the Sunwell Radiance debuff is not active outside of Sunwell, so you can take your extremely high avoidance Sunwell gear and go into older raids. And in this one example, Gruul does nothing but melee damage. So a rogue was able to go in with 100% avoidance and solo him because he didn't take any damage. They can also do the same thing. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, it's a very specific set, very specific. Right. Like you need literally.
How's he getting the first boss down?
Friends.
Yeah. So I mean, Gruul, yes, but he's not going to just get a free DSD.
You can't just stealth past that. Bummer.
No. So, for example, a lot of this comes down to on-use trinkets being the Morris Pocket Watch and the Badge of Tenacity. But on my Druid against Brutalis, I was running like 70% avoidance average over the entire fight. And that's with a 25% avoidance debuff on me. So had that not been on me,
you wouldn't have been hit.
I would have been hit 5% of the time. That's just unreal in terms of survivability. It's like I can either, if I get unlucky, I'll go splat, but most of the time I'm not taking damage.
Interesting. All right. Well, Let's start out with the Death Knight, the new tank. Let's just do a little I don't know, whoever wants to jump in, just a quick overview of what the Death Knight is, since it's completely new, like how they tank, and you know, maybe runes, just like a quick, like super quick overview of like DKs.
And I don't mind not doing it first, but I think we should, like, the first thing we should do is talk about what the designated preferred like tank spec and stuff is for each, because there's a lot of misinformation. Like a lot of people saying Blood DK is a DPS spec. What are you talking about? I played it in Wrath, right? They changed the specs a lot in Wrath for Blood DK.
Throughout the entire expansion.
It's not that you're wrong. It's not that you're crazy or misremembering things. It's not your friend is lying. It's just they changed stuff so much that like Frost is like baseline DPS, but you can have, there's some tanky stuff in there. You can do some tanky things in there. Blood is the tank spec. And then, of course, Unholy has avoidance nodes in there right at the top of the tree, has some things can be used for threat. And you can make hybrid specs with all these different things. And we'll talk about, you know, maybe some ideas of kind of how a spec would go, or like, you know, maybe not the literal points, but like an idea. But think of Blood as like basic tank. The others are DPS, but you can mix and match. And, you know, there's different reasons to not play full Blood for like threat reasons. So I guess I'll just start that and then I'll let you guys go into the details.
Kind of like how some dungeons could be tanked by a arms or a fury warrior if they had the correct gear type of deal, right?
Yep. Yeah. So most of your avoidance is going to come from most of your avoidance and threat in Wrath, at least at the start, is taken care of by your presence and your gear. So defensive stance, frost presence, these things are going to take care of your threat as well as your durability, but your gear and your avoidance is going to be the other thing that matters. Threat is typically going to come with that, especially in like the Death Knight's case with Icy Touch. So when it comes to DKs, like Zatar was saying, the specs swapped. Blood was originally supposed to be a go for the heart, armor penetration, just get in there, get to the blood type thing, right? And Frost was just freezing over your veins, being more durable. And then they swapped them, and Blood was more like heal yourself with the blood of your enemies. And this is something that I think a lot of people get wrong too, is that DK self-healing is actually not that great in Wrath of the Lich King. It's not retail where like the DK is doing twice as much healing as the healer in the group is. Like, you're not really healing yourself that often. Death Strike is a lot of overhealing. Will of the Necropolis is a good like absorption ability, and then you have Rune Tap, which will help you every now and then. So I think there's a kind of a thing there where people are like, how does the Blood DK actually tank? They're not healing themselves, but they're kind of like almost any other tank with just ways to mitigate damage. So it's not as different as it is in like retail, the way that people tank. So yeah.
Something that you throw on top of what Zatar said too, right at the start, about people not being wrong, etc. When Wrath first came out, it was touted by Blizzard that they had a huge tank problem at the time coming out of TBC, a huge tank problem. It's what J. Allen Brack quoted when he said, "You think you do, but you don't. You remember looking for a tank in trade chat, blah, blah, blah." Blizzard had a huge problem with nobody tanking. So they actually advertised that the new hero class is coming out and can tank in every spec. And in the beginning, it probably was true for most part, but they were overpowered throughout. So many changes and iterations came to the end. So I wanted to throw that in there, just kind of in the front of what he said about how they actually finally separated the specs into certain things. You were going to say something, Zatar?
I think one thing that just popped in my head, it was a different thing, but also Bone Shield is deep down in Unholy too. So there's actually and there's a deep Frost talent that increases their armor. I forget the name of it.
Unbreakable Will, I think.
Unbreakable Armor.
Oh, yeah. Unbreakable Armor.
1 minute cooldown, 20-second duration. Yeah.
You can play like a tank in all three specs. It's just when we talk about like raid tanking progression, like when things are hard, you're going to want to put a decent chunk of points into Blood for raiding, but you can tank dungeons in all three specs. You can tank Nax Remus 10 mans in, all three specs when you're not caring as much, and things are easy. So yeah, a lot of options.
Yep.
Nice.
So just to give the overview of DK really quickly, Death Knights are tanky plate wearing class that has a way to increase their armor with frost presence, much like a druid in bear form, but they cannot use a shield. So they're using parry, chance to be missed, and dodge. They have no block. And their system is they use two systems, runic power and runes. They have 6 runes, 2 of each type, blood, unholy, and frost. And these have a 10-second cooldown on them when you spend them. Your abilities will cost anywhere from 1 to 3 of these runes. And if I need a blood rune and I have no blood runes, then I can't cast it using a frost rune or anything like that. But then there's a thing called death rune that you can transform some of your runes into death runes, and they count as any of the runes. Once you learn the system a little more, it becomes a lot more clear. But you basically have 6 runes, 2 of each type. Every time you spend a rune, you generate runic power, and then you have runic power spenders. So you constantly use these things that are on a 10-second cooldown to generate runic power. And when those are all on cooldown and you need fillers, you'll typically dump your runic power. One of the things you want to do as a Death Knight, though, is you want to have a good reserve of that, because some of your defensive abilities cost blood runes, cost frost runes if you're frost, and cost runic power like anti-magic shell. So you don't want to be in the place where you've just dumped everything to try and deal whatever damage you can. You're just going to be kind of saving that for a just in case scenario. So yeah, DKs are a very interesting tank class in that regard. They also, so far from my experience, are the lowest damage dealing tank class by a long shot. Warriors, Paladins, and Druids seem to do much more damage than the Blood DK. And that's a little disappointing for some people, because you think the two-handed weapon using class, you would think it appeals to the two-handed weapon fantasy of dealing damage, and the Blood DK really doesn't do that. They're more of the really durable anti-magic tank that at the end of the game has a lot of effective HP. So
this is fascinating, because I actually have only ever played a DK through their initial quest line, because it's just so epic and fun and cool. Is the first example of phasing, and I keep meaning to do it on the beta, but I keep finding other things to do to prep that I'm just like, no. But so the runes are kind of like for me as a rogue brain to flop it, it's kind of like the opposite of a rogue, where you already have bubbles, but they're 3 different types of bubbles and 2 each, and then you're building up the energy to then use on moves. I'm sure you have to get into it to actually understand exactly how it goes, but it I just basically
is very much so
buttons.
It's Rogue Warrior mixed together. The runes are like the Rogue, where it cools down. Eventually you have it. You start a fight, it just goes back up to full. And then when you use those, you start getting rage, right? You start generating another resource that you can spend on other things. So it's kind of like those 2 classes mixed together in that regard. You have one system that needs to be built up, and the other one is one that will, given time, will go back to full, and then you start a fight with all of it.
Interesting.
The runic power is fairly similar to rage. While a warrior has to hit stuff with auto attacks to generate rage, a DK has to use his rune spending abilities to generate runic power. But aside from that, they're kind of 2 very similar systems, if not identical.
And dumb question, getting hit, you don't gain runic rage.
So here's the thing, is Death Knights are the only tank class in Wrath of the Lich King that gets 0 benefit from being hit. The only time they benefit from it is when they have anti-magic shell up. They don't have rage like Druids and Warriors. They don't want to get hit. Druids and Warriors will have to balance mitigation with threat at some point, where they're like, I have too much mitigation for this thing that's under-leveled content. I'm going to dodge everything. I'm not going to be generating any rage here. Paladins, you want to block to reflect damage. And of course, in Wrath of the Lich King, it's to generate mana, and it's also to get hit so that you can have spiritual attunement and gain more that way. Divine Plea does take care of that a little bit in Wrath of the Lich King, but DKs actually have pretty much no benefit from getting hit, so they want to avoid as much as possible. So they're the one class that I think stacking avoidance on is probably preferred. and that's why I think they're going to have so much effective HP at the end of the game.
Their Rune Strike ability, which is kind of similar to Heroic Strike for warriors, it is only usable after dodging or parrying an ability.
Wait, you said Heroic Strike. You mean Revenge,
yes.
right?
No.
So it's
like
both.
Heroic
It's both
Strike.
together. It's both together.
Yeah.
It's both together. Yeah.
Okay.
Like Heroic Strike in that it replaces an auto attack. You know how it takes like a white hit, makes it yellow, and it's not like on global or anything. It just goes with your next swing. That's what it does, but it activates like Revenge.
So see, this is the type of stuff that I think casuals love, because like me, like I just didn't even get that. Like, but on the side note too, I love the way you say mana.
It's the correct way.
It is. But I've always said mana, and like it's just like it's just stuck. And most people say mana, but you say mana, and it was hilarious. There was an episode of Classic Life where everybody was saying mana first, and then you said mana, and then everybody switched to mana. It was like, oh, don't do different than Zirene. It was hilarious.
I will just always say mana. I don't know. For me, they're two different things. Mana is M-A-N-N-A. It's the bread from the gods. If you go look up any dictionary online and you have them do pronunciation, M-A-N-N-A will be mana, and mana will be M-A-N-A. Right.
You
but
are
adopted pronunciations
right.
are still true. But adopted pronunciations, language is all about communication. So as long as you know what I mean, it can become an adopted pronunciation. So mana is still actually acceptable. Right. So it's not like I'm going to be a dick about these things. Be like, mana. Like, I don't.
It's just the way it sounds. Mana just sounds like pompous. Mana, you know.
It does sound a little bit like that. It's also like, because I was an actor in the past. So it's really weird to hit certain things and not sound pretentious saying mana. And even if I was to say the word better, but with T's in it and say better, makes you sound like a dick.
Yep.
If I start saying, and I mean, you could have played that better. Like, it's just like, we like our double D's better. Here instead of double T's, you know?
Yep. You're actually using D's.
Better.
And like the British have a whole nother system of just saying things differently. But it also reminds me of, I said, like Super Smash Brothers Melee came out, and I had never seen the word. I called it melee forever. And then I was corrected. And I was like, oh, and I still to this day sometimes say melee and like think to myself, and like have to correct melee. Sorry. It's just, sorry. Yeah. I just wanted to throw that out because anytime anybody says mana in Raid, I go, mana.
Okay, so you're the one really being a dick here.
I am. But okay, so all right, so we definitely got in the no shield. That was actually perfect. We kind of already covered the specs that were viable for raids and dungeons. We covered that raids you're gonna want to be like mostly blood, but you can kind of spec dungeons, maybe heroics in most specs.
My personal experience and recommendation is that you go deep frost hybrid, whether you're DPS spec with tank gear on and you tank heroics that way, you're going to have a much better time tanking heroics as full frost with tank gear. And you're also going to have a better time on Nax Trash doing that. On bosses like Sartharian or Malagos or Patchwork, blood is what my recommendation is there. But outside of that, frost is kind of the thing that I see being the AOE one more taker. Fun spec to able to actually hold threat on AOE packs. So that's my personal recommendation and experience. So I think that for me, I don't really think blood has much of a place in phase one outside of the solo bosses.
Anybody have anything to add or counter to that?
I would just say, you can almost flip it in your head. Like, think of frost as what you're going to tank in a lot of cases. And when do I want to be blood so I don't get owned, right? Yeah. Anytime that you're getting owned, play blood. Otherwise, you can play anything else, typically frost.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, the chat is like, has caught on to like a few of the things that like, I think is like, see, it's secret tech. There's like 2 secret tech things for for DKs that I think are going to get a lot more noticeable in the future. I think they're going to become more popular. Is that Blood has always been kind of the two-handed spec, right? I'm actually of the opinion that 2 one-handers is much better for Blood, for dual wielding, to actually tank things. And the reason is because there's no two-hander in the game that has things that increase your effective HP as much as having 2 one-handers. There are no two-handers that have defense, no significant dodge, parry. They're mostly armor pen, crit, and then stamina. But one-handers have a ton of tank stats on them that increase your effective HP, which I think is the whole purpose of having a Blood DK. The only problem with that is that one-handers in phase 1, especially unholy DKs, want them for damage dealing, and they're basically stat sticks for you. So a Blood DK's weapon is essentially what it is for like a warrior's bow, right?
Or
you're not going to prioritize
a hunter's weapon without
exactly.
without melee weaving, of course.
Yeah. So in my opinion, that if you want more effective HP, Blood, most of your threat comes from Icy Touch, which is a threat modifier of 14x equals damage. So if I Icy Touch for 2k on a crit, I just did 28,000 threat with a single ability. And it only gets better from there because it scales with AP. So Icy Touch basically does all of your threat for you. Your weapons are basically stat sticks, and the whole point is having more and more effective HP. So I think having 2 one-handers is better. Some people will say, well, what about parry haste? Only really dragons in Wrath of the Lich King do parry haste anymore. And if something parry hastes, you turn your attack off, like Syndragosa, like Sartharian or whatever, and you just Icy Touch instead. But also there's another layer to it where Corpse had mentioned Rune Strike is behaving or is like Heroic Strike, but it actually has the same stupid properties of Heroic Strike queuing. So I don't know, like Heroic Strike queuing, for people who don't know, is the reason warriors don't have to stack hit like rogues do when they're dual wielding is that when you have Heroic Strike queued, your main hand and offhand adopt the properties of yellow hits. So your main hand only requires 9% chance to hit. And it means that while your Heroic Strike is queued or your cleave is queued, your offhand doesn't have dual wield penalty, and it only has a 9% chance to miss as well. So you only need 9% hit instead of the 26 or so that rogues need for their offhand.
Wait, hold on.
Go ahead.
Is that in TBC too?
That is in TBC.
I thought they fixed it.
I swore I even covered that on the pod. Like, why have I not been doing that on my freaking warrior? Like,
why a lot of warriors stop it. Soft cap.
You should just be hitting Heroic Strike all the time anyway.
Well, but like,
it's also a damage increase without that. But
yeah, I was like,
yes. So
especially with Impale, doesn't work on auto attacks.
Late in Classic, like, you just were like Heroic Strike actually took over Whirlwind. Like, you would actually do that, and Whirlwind was your last thing once you were over 2k attack power. But prior to that, like, if you didn't have world buffs, basically the only way to do good damage was to do the cancel. But I swore I read that changed, and then I've only been playing my warrior for like the tail end of BET Hyjal, and I've been not doing it in the best gear, of course, but like till now, and like I don't even have that macro on my bar. Are you telling me it's still worthwhile?
I'm saying it's worthwhile, but at the same time, you almost will never cancel it in the first place once you have good gear, because you're just going to hold it down, right? You're just going to hold down Heroic Strike. If you have like a really bad opener or something like that, then yeah, potentially.
I've just gotten to that point with gear.
Yeah. It's also something where, like, if you're monitoring your rage really heavily during execute phase, you want to hold down Heroic Strike so that your offhand doesn't miss, right? Even if the Heroic Strike never goes off,
I didn't know that
want to hold down Heroic Strike. Yep, you want to hold down Heroic Strike, because what will happen is you get the rage for Heroic Strike, right? Because your main hand hit, your offhand is queued, and you're about to execute. Your offhand will hit, and we'll have the extra chance to not miss, and then you'll be guaranteed to get that rage for the execute, right?
Dude, so I can't wait to go to my next G. DKP is my warrior.
Yeah. You gotta be careful with that. So basically, what I'm getting at here is when you have Rune Strike queued, your offhand adopts all Rune Strike properties. Only 8% chance to miss instead of dual wield. cannot be blocked, dodged, or parried. So when you have Rune Strike queued, your offhand cannot be blocked, dodged, parried, or missed once you have 8% hit as a DK. So
Awesome.
yeah. So I definitely think dual wielding is probably going to be the way to go for DKs that want to tank. But at the end of the day, the DK rule is basically just take whatever weapon nobody else wants, right? If there's a one-hander that drops and nobody else wants it, just grab it. If there's like a tank one-hander that nobody wants. If like Last Laugh, you probably won't get because it's Unholy DK's best weapon, and some of them want two of them. And it's also a very good tank weapon, but your tank weapon really doesn't matter. It's why I also think like Shadow Moor and Prio for Blood DK is absolutely like, people are like, where are they on the Prio list? I'm like, they are not even on the list. They should not be on the list. They would be last, but they would be like, I would cut the list off there before them. It's just not, it shouldn't be a thing to consider if you're actually like trying to min max.
Okay. Cool. Yeah. All right. Well, yeah, let's get into it. What are DK's mainly suited for? Are like, what is their standing as like main tank in a raid? Of course, I guess we have to hit 25 and 10 man, but go ahead.
I would say like kind of the way I see DK and how I would describe it to somebody of like, if they want to play this class, is like it is just the beef tank, kind of in the way that I guess a lot of people see bears right now. Bears are still going to be tanky, of course, in Wrath, but like DK, like Zirene mentioned, you're not doing damage. DK is the tank that you want when your healer dies on a mechanic and you're down a healer. And now the healing starts to matter. If everything goes according to plan, your DK is not going to heal very much. But like on the beta, I was doing a 10-man, especially this is big in 10-man. If one of your healers dies in a 10-man, I say Blood DK, you can still live. Even on some harder stuff, that's when your death strikes are not going to overheal. One of the reasons why I was still indecision on what to play, I decided to play Blood DK because of a Sapphiron attempt in Naxxramas where we had a healer die, and I healed for 350,000 as a Blood DK, and the healer only healed me for 350,000, and then of course healed everyone else with Beacon, who was an HPAL. But I was like, okay, I know this is going to happen. I know I'm going to be in a 10-man. I know other people, someone's going to screw up. Some healers are going to die. I'm going to be like the only tank that's going to live here. And of course, with more gear, it's more common. But I think that's the Death Knight is, okay, he's got cooldowns. He's got the best cooldowns, I would say, in total. And it's got that little bit of extra healing to cover other people's mistakes. That I think that's why you play Blood DK. And I don't think you play Blood DK if you're the kind of person that necessarily like maybe always needs something to press. Sometimes you run out of runes and you can't pull a pack for 10 seconds because you don't have Death and Decay, especially if you're playing Blood. That's kind of the downside. But I'd say that's how I see
like the Paladin's mana problems early on in TBC, right?
It's almost and they're much better in Wrath, so it's almost like DKs have more mana issues than Paladins. It's kind of weird. And they don't have mana or mana.
Okay.
More runes, more problems.
The DK is the main character boss tank. Like,
yep.
If you like tanking bosses and that's the thing that you like, DK is probably the best character for you to play. It's Blood DK. If you care about trash a lot, then it probably isn't really. You could maybe Frost off tank, but Blood DK is very much so. If you enjoy that feeling of being a main character in a raid and being the person that is in charge of threat, using cooldowns, keeping the raid alive from just a like this boss isn't running loose type thing, then Blood DK is definitely the character you want to play. I don't know if anybody's ever played like League of Legends before, and there's that character called Nunu, a little Yeti that runs around and like rolls a snowball and stuff, and all he does is steal your stuff, but he doesn't really do anything with it anyway. So the whole saying for like Nunu was he makes you as useless as he is. That's what Blood DKs do to bosses. Like, you're not going to do any damage, but the boss isn't going to do any damage to you either. So that's how I think about it, is they make the bosses useless as they are. So if you're somebody who doesn't really care about dealing damage, then Blood DK could be a character for you.
Now, I've also heard like that, like mix and match, like changing, Nax, it's not going to matter anything's gonna work if you have a competent raid, to be honest. At least that's from what I've seen and what I also remember from back in the day. But when you get later on into different bosses, is it going to be smart to switch out like the main tank depending on the boss? Like, for instance, I've heard that DKs are the best against bosses that have a lot of spell usage, because I've heard that they have the best spell mitigation. Real quick, Corpse, do you want to throw anything in here? I saw you just unmute. You haven't talked for a little bit.
No, I'm good.
Okay. So
They're covering everything.
yeah, so is that a thing, and like, do they shine more on other bosses than others?
Yeah, like I said before, the Malagos tanking, the Sartharian tanking, dragons are really DK's like bread and butter for what they tank very well. If there's a dragon, your DK is probably the best tank for it, because they have a 45-second cooldown that mitigates, I think, 75% of magic damage taken, transitions it into runic power for them in the resource, and it's up to about, I think, half their total HP or something like that. I forget the other caveat of it.
When you press it, it doesn't feel fair.
It's 45-second cooldown, and you have all these other cooldowns that do amazing things as well. So yeah, anti-magic shell is just an insane cooldown, and they're very much so good at tanking bosses like dragons. So yeah, dragon, like you say, if you have like a paladin tanking most of your stuff, because there's like AoE involved, your blood DK is going to tank like the solo things, and they're going to do it very well.
Yeah, it's like if there's like, take like Sartharian. One tank's got to grab some ads. One tank's sitting still tanking the big thing that hits hard. When you just kind of think of what tanks are good at, it's like, okay, the blood DK is good at standing still, tanking things, and a lot of the other tanks are better at AoE. And even a lot of people consider blood DK as like really good scaling, but like Zirene said, even from phase 1, they're going to be very good at the dragon, the magic encounters. So they're very good at that kind of stuff, and they also still scale to be just very good in general, of course. So
okay. What are they the worst at? Is that even a good question?
AoE.
At this point?
They're terrible at AoE.
Blood.
Demonology warlocks are going to hate you. Like, if you have a blood DK and he insists on like tanking on trash, the rogues are probably tanking for him. They're doing the tricks of the trade rotation on him so that he can tank. Because basically anybody can tank in Wrath of the Lich King if the rogues are tricksing them. But that is probably what will happen if you have a DK that wants to tank that stuff. You also feel pretty bad in heroics, because the heroics is a lot of just cleaving through stuff. My friend was telling me, I think he described it the best way. Heroics are basically like playing Diablo 3. You literally are just cleaving through everything. It just feels like stuff walks up, it just dies. It just dies.
I've heard you can get through lots of the heroics if your tank leaves, even.
Yeah. There isn't really too much of like a tank requirement. That's why like Frost can do it, right? Just need most of your durability, like I said, comes from your not even your spec, just your gear and your defensive stance or frost presence or bear form. So
hear that, people? If you can't find a tank for your heroic, just go. Screw it. 5 DPS. Oh no. 3 DPS, 1 heal, and a heal hands. Do it.
Oh boy.
All
heal
right.
hands is so bad you need another healer to cover for them now.
Oh god.
That's not sounding good.
Also, good tip. So if I'm ever running a heroic with a blood DK, tricks on cooldown, and cool.
Tricks them on
you'll get through it, but it's just, heroics are just, it's a timing thing, so blood DK is like the one tank that's just going to slow everything down. Unfortunately, if everyone presses their buttons the second the fight starts, which is how everyone will play in Wrath because of how threat changes. So
everybody's going to press their nitro too and run into the boss with rocket boots on. So
rocket boots in front of you, and you were expected to retake threat when you do less threat than them to begin with. So it's a little tough.
All right, so new
Icy Touch does a good job there, though.
Yeah, new
single target, you're good. But
like new DK tanks, dual spec, and make sure you have an AoE spec. So basically what I'm hearing. Gearing and glyphs. What stats do DKs prioritize, and what glyphs I mean, I guess like the glyphs probably change between raid and between dungeons, but we could focus on raids.
Yeah, for blood, it's basically you just want to get strength, stamina, or like two of your biggest stats, because 25% of your strength turns into parry rating. So those are usually your two most desired stats, followed by dodge. Because like I said, DKs don't really have any issue with needing to be hit like the other classes do, right? So they can actually stack as much mitigation as they really want to. Remember, there are DRs to this. But strength will also give them kind of spell power for their threat. So icy touch is, people call it IT and it stands for icy touch, but it really stands for icy taunt. That's basically what it does when you press the button, is it taunts the mob. It's so much threat. I want to do a run where literally my entire bar is just icy touch just for the memes and see if I could actually tank. And I'm pretty sure that I would be able to. Yeah.
It's rough as off tank too, because you're just like, okay, this guy's had 10 seconds, right? And you touch it once and then you're like,
oh yeah, dude.
I'm kind of close.
Yeah. I think I did that to you once or twice by accident.
Yeah. Well, and then it's really awkward if you're prot warrior, you don't have enough rage. You're like, all right, well, we're flipping roles now. All right, you got it, because prot warrior really needs to get hit.
Patchwork is the trickiest, because you want to.
It's rough.
You want the blood DK to be number 2 on threat, but he has to be on the threat table at the start, but not above you. So it's like, if he crits this opener, like he's just the tank now.
Yeah, so that's why I'd say hard. Week 1, I'm just like, get our melee DPS, get away from the boss, please. just step away. Like, it's week 1, it's our first 25 man or something. Just melee, just get away. Because on the beta, I want to say probably pretty much every patchwork attempt, a melee died. Because
that's the only boss I think
died.
I've run a few different runs. I think 2 different ones with Zirene, and like patchwork was the only one that was ever really a weird issue. Like we two healed an entire one with rugs, and patchwork was the one we had to change up a whole bunch of crap.
But in terms of, like, you were asking about glyphs and was a gear stat priority. Hit is also, I would say, one of your other prios. So like stamina, strength, dodge, parry, I guess a little bit, and then your hit, because it also works on spell hit. And most of your threat is spells.
Yeah, so everything changes there.
Yeah. And keep in mind, it's 8% chance to miss bosses with melee, 17% chance to miss them with spells in Wrath of the Lich King.
I think that's been that way in TBC and in Classic too the entire time, right?
Yeah. Physical hit is 9%.
Yes, physical hit's 9%, and in spells it's 16%, because you always have a 1% chance to get resisted.
Yep.
Oh, yeah,
so here they took that away, but you need that extra percentage. So yeah, you got to get 17% as a spell hit now.
17% chance to be resisted, but you can only cover 16% of that through spell hit.
Okay. So it's still,
but that's not in Wrath of the Lich King anymore, right?
Yeah, in Wrath you go to 17. And one thing to mention, the reason why we're saying spell hit is because some of the tanks have spells, but all of their taunts are considered spells. But hit is now just a thing. There's no spell hit. There's no physical hit. So if you're playing something like a Blood DK and you get to your 8% hit, your taunt can still miss, right? And if you glyph for it, there's a glyph. I think for every class, it's all just should be 8%.
Yep.
And that would give you 8% more. But that's, you add those up, that's 16. So sometimes you may want to do like
spell hit has a better conversion than melee hit. So 8% melee hit will.
Then you should
forget the exact
10 and
number.
a half. Yeah.
Okay, 10.5% spell hit. Yeah.
You don't need an extra one then. My bad. But the 8% glyph is something you're going to do on a boss where you really don't want to miss your taunt.
Yeah, it's very, very good. But in terms of like for Blood DK, the only glyph that I think is actually required is like Vampiric Blood. It's just 5 seconds longer duration on a 1 minute cooldown, makes it really good. And the other ones are kind of like Rune Tap isn't that great. Death Strike, your damage doesn't really matter that much. So a lot of them are kind of taster's choice in that regard. Same with the Taunt one. Because the Taunt one doesn't really matter on Trash. But if there's tauntable bosses and stuff that you're worried about, you probably are pressing Icy Touch anyway. So yeah, I feel like you can kind of add your own spice to it, but the main one that you should be getting is Vampiric Blood. The other ones don't really change too much about you, and you guys might have a different opinion on this. Some people like Pestilence, I don't. Some people are Disease. Some people like the Death Strike one. I feel like there's not really much that I need glyph wise.
Well, I guess the one thing or two things I would say, if you do end up trying to play blood on a fight where you still need some AoE, the glyph of Death and Decay can be good. But like we mentioned, a lot of the situations you want to be just playing Frost in that case. But if you find yourself in an AoE situation, that's still great.
And the glyph of Death and Decay does what?
It's just more damage.
20% more. Okay. Yeah. I actually use that one because it's so bad when you don't have anything good for AoE.
I mean, even if you're just, I don't know, if you, I was gonna say like there's fights where it's like Noth, you can just play Frost, but if there's like an add or two coming in, even then you can feel it. So yeah, any situation where there's more than one thing, sometimes you want the Death and Decay, but you can also just icy touch everything too. Yeah, it depends. But the only one I'll mention is I think Glyph of Disease. I would say it's fun. I like it because I'm a type of person. I just want to heal as much as possible, even though it's not something you necessarily need to do. So a little thing about
Zirene likes to eviscerate. That's an inside joke with me and him. Sorry.
I love eviscerate a lot.
But if you read like Death Strike, right? The wording on Death Strike says you heal for 5% of his maximum health for each of their diseases on the target. So you need your diseases on the target. And the normal way to keep it up is you press Frost or Icy Touch, and then you press Plague Strike. If you use a Glyph of Disease, though, you can use a Blood Rune to refresh your I guess you're icy touching anyway, so it's no big deal, but it replaces the Plague Strike. So you basically have extra unholy runes, and your Death Strike is unholy in Frost. So long story short, it's a little complicated, but if you play Glyph of Disease, you get more Death Strikes, and you can, instead of pressing Blood Strike, which kind of doesn't do anything anyway, you would use Pestilence to refresh your diseases. So that's just something I like to use because when I'm playing it, I'm having fun if I'm healing a lot. And if I'm, just, I guess, pressing as many Death Strikes as possible, I'm the kind of guy that is Death Striking more than I should when I should be icy touching more. And I have to make sure, I'm not griefing threat or anything because I keep trying to heal more. But that's one thing I'd mention.
If you're a big Death Striker, you should definitely get an enemy swing timer and time your Death Strikes with their swings. It's very helpful.
And one thing I'll just toss in now, because we haven't talked about it and it's kind of important. There's a talent called Blade Barrier, which when your blood runes are on cooldown, you're going to take 5% less damage for 10 seconds. So this entire time we're talking about you kind of need to keep a blood rune ready for a heal. You might want to keep a blood rune ready for a defensive. Well, not always, because you need to put them on cooldown at some point because you need 5% DR. And you ideally, if more advanced, you want to try and get a weak aura and keep up that 5% DR at all times.
And just really tell everybody what DR means real
damage reduction. So it's really good. You want to take less damage.
We just had a lot of people complain about the acronyms recently. So sorry.
Yeah. Yep. My bad. But so with the 5% damage reduction, you can really line it up with your blood runes because there's two of them. What you can do is you wait for one blood rune to be about to be ready. Then you spend your blood rune. Now your blood runes have been spent. You're now going to have a 10-second damage reduction for 5%. And boom, your other blood rune just became available. And you actually didn't have a period of time where you weren't ready for a defensive. So that's there's little micro things you can use a blood decay that it don't really matter that much, but it's a little something for you to do. And I think there's probably more there for blood than the other tanks when it comes to little stuff to do. Maybe Paladin is second because they have cool utility, but I think blood decay is maybe the little things you can do.
Yeah, there's tiny things that'll make a difference for you can feel it when you're healing and etc. Because before pull, using Death and Decay into Horn, into waiting until the rune from the blood rune's about to come back up, and just using Blood Boil to get rid of both your blood runes right as the other one comes back up, right? And then you pull, and you'll have double icy touch into just setting your diseases up. into using your blood rune before the other one comes back up. So you can just basically, it's like blade barrier juggling, where you're trying to make sure that you don't use both of your runes at the same time, and that one comes up right as the other one is being used. So,
yeah, and we haven't mentioned, well, actually, you mentioned it way long time ago, but you can make these death runes that are going to allow you to use any type of ability, not a specific one. So you can even come into a pool, right before the boss, you want to death strike as much as you can. You can come into a pool with a bunch of frost runes and, smash icy touch a bunch. And, if you're paying attention before the pool, that's, more icy touches. That's like 4 versus 2. And then that doesn't even start. And then you start using your full reset, and then you use your blood tap, empowered rune weapon, right? In blood tap, I think it's called.
Yeah.
There's 2 taps. So blood tap, rune tap. I don't want to get in trouble. It might be called rune tap, actually. Is rune tap the right one? No, rune tap is the healing one,
rune tap's the heal,
which doesn't make sense. Blood tap is the rune.
Blood tap is supposed to cost HP unless you glyph it, which I
guess that makes sense. But rune tap kind of doesn't reset a rune. It's called rune tap. Yeah, so I have a little bit of trouble with it, but I'll get there.
All right. One last thing I wanted to ask before I just asked the last part about professions is, so as a rogue, okay, you guys talked about hit. Now, we talked about this with Simonize when he was on recently about hit now just is straight up spell hit and melee hit. But as a rogue, you have to pay attention to different talents, because you'll have different talents that say melee hit, and you'll have different talents that say poisons hit, and poisons hit is spell hit. So is there anything you have to really kind of look at that doesn't specifically say this is spell hit for DKs, whereas rogue doesn't say spell hit, it says poison hit?
There's actually 2 talents. So in Unholy, there's one that increases your chance to hit with spells. And then in Frost, there's one that is it's melee weapons. So you kind of have to keep track of both of those there. Okay. So there's actually 2 talents that do 2 different things.
That's something to really watch, because rogue, you could make up your extra, as a rogue, you can make up your extra spell hit without having to actually sacrifice it on the gear through talents. So I just thought I'd throw that in there. It's something you have to keep track of with probably many different classes, not just DK or rogue. All right, best professions.
Engineering, jewel crafting. That's what it feels like.
Is that pretty much for everybody? Do I just skip this question for the rest of them?
There's some that might want tailoring for their cloak snapshotting on bosses. So, I'm not sure though. There may be a few, but it's basically jewel crafting and engineering for everyone.
For tanking, a couple of reasons why it's a little different from the other classes. When you have a class that has one primary stat that they like a lot, Death Knights in general, even the DPS Death Knights, they love strength, and then tanks specifically love stamina, and all tanks love stamina. The jewel crafting gems are a little bit better than other classes that are maybe more balanced, like Rogue, for example. The difference between attack power gem or a hit gem or an expertise gem, or it's all kind of close, I would say. But when you have a spec that really likes a specific gem in particular that stands out from the rest, and you can get it through jewel crafting, but maybe the other professions can't give you that option, right? I can get stamina as a tank, and I'll pick the worst counterexample. If I go for inscription or something, it's just going to give me dodge. That's not the main thing I want. So that, and then the trinket. There's a trinket that's really good that has stamina and an on-use dodge. So a lot of,
kind of gem slot, right?
It's nice that one of them is yellow too, which can kind of help with crit immunity, especially for warrior, I would say. Probably paladin too. But long story short, JC is great for everyone, but extra great for tank because of the trinket. And I don't think, is there any other class that uses a jewel crafting trinket right out the gate? I besides tanks, I don't think so, but I could be wrong. There could be some weird paladin things again with some mana thing, but I don't think so. I don't think they use that.
I'm not sure. Yeah, but jewel crafting gives you a lot of flexibility because there are things like expertise gems or armor pen gems eventually that like you don't have professions giving you expertise or armor penetration really. So it's like it gives you more customization of your class throughout the phases without having to really swap ever.
You cannot get more expertise than a jewel crafter gets because they can actually use like big expertise gems and then gem everything else with expertise. If you're doing something like weird with like full expertise.
And if you don't care about min-maxing to the extreme, blacksmithing gives almost the same bonus as jewel crafting. You get extra gems rather than more powerful gems. However, you do lose that trinket as you won't have that as blacksmithing.
Yeah, but like the way I see it, I don't think it really matters what you play, but you know, I kind of explained why jewel crafting is like, I guess, really good. I think engineering is like you're zooming around with rocket boots. You've got a bomb that you can throw every 6 minutes, and the bomb is like has I think like none of the downsides that you have ever had in all the classic variations of throwing bombs and explosives, and doesn't cause any issues with your auto attack. And so you get a bomb every 6 minutes. It's nice. You get parachute cloak, you get rocket boots. Engineering is just cool.
And on top
well,
of
you don't want to be the last person in. You don't want to be the person who doesn't have rocket boots. That's
Well, and
that's one for me.
Yeah, that was what I was going to say. The DK was designed around bringing mobs to you, or you know, PvP. Bring like it's OP. Bringing
everybody rocket boots in, and then you death grip it away from them to you in the back. Like,
but you talk about death grip. That's kind of you can't. I don't know if you've talked about that enough.
Yeah, but you can't use that on bosses though. So having rocket boots is really good because their mobility on like getting to people is way down, correct? Like so having those rocket boots could be huge. And like honestly, you know, we could talk about basically engineering is just BIS for almost, if not every class. If you don't have rocket boots and you're in a guild that's like even like semi-sweaty, they're probably gonna laugh at you. Like it's just the sad hard truth because it's an enchant now. You don't have to actually wear the crappy boots. So, all right. Well, okay. Let's warrior.
Oh wait. Oh, one more thing before we move away from DK.
Final thoughts. My bad.
Races.
Oh, races! I didn't put in here for some reason. I'm an idiot.
Interesting.
Yeah. Please.
What do you think? What do you guys like?
I think Night Elf is the best blood tank.
I'm a Night Elf believer.
By far. I think it's by far the best. Like when I compare it to everything else, human might situationally be good. But Night Elf actually just seems like the best. Shadow Meld apparently can like avoid different mechanics, can force a tank swap on untauntable fights, control people. And then even without Shadow Meld though, the racial being 2% chance to be missed by melee and range attacks is just better than the other options for mitigation. And it doesn't DR. All of that goes on after your damage or your DR'd stats or your diminishing return stats. So after all of your defense rating, chance to be missed, on top of that is the 3% from your talent if you want that, and then the 2% from Night Elf. None of that DRs afterwards.
Yeah. So I'm going to be going Night Elf since I play Alliance. I'm a Night Elf fan. I guess Horde side, you can of course play Orc for expertise. There's a lot of good axes.
The racial doesn't give you a healing debuff anymore, so
and
Troll is very, very good. Just in general, everybody likes Troll for damage. If you ever plan on playing damage or having like a dual spec, Troll seems to be the best for Unholy. Snapshotting Gargoyle value is very, very high with Berserking. So Tauren racial is really bad. Sadly, it's like extremely bad. Blood Elf is an honorable mention here because they have a similar racial, but it's 2% chance to be missed by spells. So not as good as the Night Elf one, but it's still good.
They kind of already own spells, so it kind of depends on which way you look at it. They're already like insane at tanking magic, so do they need it? No. But they're always going to be slotted in for a magic fight. So it depends how you look at it, but
Human is a good one as well. Dwarf is also decent. Not like terrible or anything like that.
Is human good
don't-
because
don't
of
go
every man for himself, aka whatever the new word is for it?
Auto trigger. I mean, you're going to have less uses for that than it's not like you're constantly going to be using it and saving your life. And from what I recall, I think there's some mechanics that are like you can't use it on that are like very specific, like you're not supposed to play right now. But you know, I'm sure we'll find some good uses for it.
If you plan to PvP, then you go human.
Yeah. And you can play any of the races. So definitely go for like prioritize PvP if you're going to do that, and you'll be fine without it. Draenei, we haven't mentioned it, but Draenei is obviously great. Gives your group hit. You know, you could argue it's going to be like on paper the best way to support your group.
Draenei racial is definitely the biggest damage increase out of all of the racials because it's group wide, right?
Yeah.
But once everybody has it in their group, it's useless. So it's like it's the best up until a point.
But male or female though?
Female.
Female, definitely.
I mean male.
Gotta go male.
I like
Zatar's a male night elf slayer.
I love it. They just run like this.
Male night elf enjoyer. We like to use the term enjoyer.
Oh man. All right. Well, I cannot believe I didn't have that in the actual questions race. That's huge. My bad.
Yeah, I think it's just like a newer development that Night Elf Blood Decay, because it's something where like dual wield Blood Decay and Night Elf Blood Decay, I think are going to be the things that you're going to hear more about this in the next few months as the game rolls out. People are really going to start pushing towards that because it was not a thing like 2 months ago.
And I feel like
locked in on human Draenei.
I feel like Zatar loves you because I'm pretty sure you main tank as a warrior male night elf right now.
Hey man, the dodge chance really adds up. All right.
All
right. How many times I might have lived because of that? We don't know.
We don't know. We don't know.
We cannot know.
And I died enough that my dying was more important than any threat. Okay. So.
And if you like the way like your armor looks, Troll's probably not a good choice because everything clips through every piece of armor on Troll. All right, guys, let's move to Warrior. So how has Warrior changed going into Wrath?
So this is an interesting question. Would you guys say they have gotten better?
Yeah.
I think
way better.
I think they have gotten worse over the course of the entirety of Wrath versus the entirety of TBC in the right hands. But I think for the average player, they're tremendously better because you can play the class. I'm like a prot warrior coper, like a, phase 1, phase 2. I think that should count. Progression kind of boomer person. So,
okay. So that value is gone down.
Yeah, they're flipped. So I think that's the first thing to say. In my eyes, they're completely flipped from TBC to Wrath. We mentioned a little bit before. They went from being the defensive tank to, I would view them the offensive tank.
Yes.
The tank that's going to help your damage. And I think they're the most underrated tank right now because I personally am the one screaming at our DPS warriors to sunder. I'm the one who is, the only one putting up thunderclap. I'm the one, I'm doing these things that no one realizes, like your average guild, they're just not going to sunder, and you're going to have to make a rogue do it or something. And that's a benefit of a warrior. So I would say they're the most underrated going in, and a lot of people hate them. So I would.
Yep. Oh, wow. People don't like them when they're People don't like them when they're good. And yeah, I'm of the same opinion. I actually think Warrior
stronger.
I actually think in the first phase in Naxxramas 25-man speed run at the top level, you will see warriors in there. You will see a warrior main tank. I think by the end of the phase, especially, they add the most damage to the raid. The Sunder glyphs and Devastate glyphs that allow them to give multiple Sunders on trash will speed you up. Shattering Throw is a raid DPS increase. There's so much that they add to the raid while still dealing damage the same that's comparable to like a prop paladin in a full clear, who right now is doing the most damage personally out of all the tanks. So the Prot Warrior's mobility adds on top of that their ability to AoE tank with Thunderclap, 3-minute challenging shout cooldown, Shockwave. Even if you don't go Shockwave, just Revenge hitting for 8 to 10k and cleaving is pretty big. So there's a lot of really good things for him. And I actually think with the announcement of cooldowns resetting on boss kill, Warriors actually just got even better because you don't have to glyph the 2 glyphs that people do on private servers, which is Last Stand and Shield Wall. You can keep your 60% Shield Wall instead of get the 2-minute cooldown off of it. And now you can go for even more offensive glyphs, like having both the combo of the Devastate that gives you 2 Sunders on your main target. Sunder Armor combines with that and will do a 3rd Sunder on an off target. And then you can get Glyph of Cleave on top of that and hit 3 things with Cleave if you really want to. So there's a lot of freedom that's being opened up here for Warriors. And I think it's actually really cool. I know a lot of people doubt them, but I actually think Prot Warrior in phase 1 is the most offensive tank, and they will be brought to speedruns because of that.
And I think the glyph you mentioned, like there's good glyphs. There's even glyph of blocking, which applies as you shield slam. So if you're ever worried about threat or single target,
you guys
you are shield slamming, you're going to immediately get shield block value. And don't forget that shield block value comes from strength now. No matter what happens, you're going to have a bunch of shield block value, and your shield slams reset from your Devastate crits, I believe, or it might be a percentage. I forget.
It's a 15. It's a percentage chance from Devastate and Revenge.
Yeah, okay. It's just
Yeah,
sword and
not tied to any particular outcome.
Yeah,
like critting.
But if you're getting a bunch of shield slams, basically. So if you free up a glyph, you get 10% more block value, which is going to help mitigation and threat if you can slot that in, which I think is going to be an optional glyph that you can go with.
Yeah, absolutely. Because that also is the 10% block value is also threat, because they have a Thorns talent that is 20% of their block value is reflected back to attackers. Yeah. So you just added a little bit more to that.
Well, shield block increases your block value, so it just keeps working itself in.
And Shield Slam also does more damage based on your block value.
Yes.
2 parts that actually increase your threat.
And Shield Block gives you a 100% chance to block and 100% increased block value. So 40-second cooldown. It's very good. It's very, very good. So I want to use it as much as possible.
I love how much you guys love Warrior, because I do too. Because you guys just jumped ahead a whole bunch of different things.
Oh, yeah.
And I was more looking towards things
There's so much about it that's so good.
Well, I was just looking like how they changed from TBC to Wrath. So like, for instance, like I know uncrushable isn't a thing anymore, but a big change is that a lot of people don't know and still aren't bidding on the proper gear in GDKPs is that shield block goes from like a 5-second cooldown to like a minute cooldown that can go down to 40-second cooldown with talents. I was looking for those types of changes that are like huge changes to the way the class works.
Yeah, okay. I can do a rundown if you want. So Thunderclap.
I'd love it.
Thunderclap no longer only hits 4 things, and it hits a lot of things. It hits all the things that are near you. Now, the other cool thing about Thunderclap, it goes from doing no damage to doing damage, and then it scales with attack power. Revenge goes from doing no damage.
One more thing about Thunderclap.
Sure.
Even if it's more than the target cap, you can still crit and apply deep wounds, which isn't AoE capped.
Yeah, if you're going into arms, impale, deep wound,
letting everybody know the new AoE cap is 10 mobs, and then that's when it starts to depreciate. Just letting everybody know. Right.
Yes.
Sorry.
But then the individual ticks of the bleed is what he's saying would do, that's not AoE once the bleed is on it. So that does full damage.
I get Thunderclap, crit you for 2, and then my deep wounds will start ticking for 380, right? Things like that will start happening. And also, you technically aren't AoE capped on your reflect damage either. So innumerable things can hit you and you'll still reflect. So they're actually a lot better at AoEing than before.
Yep. Which we can go into Shockwave. Now, not every spec is going to have Shockwave, but more parts of like holding threat. Shockwave is nuts. I think a lot of people are starting to sleep on Shockwave because people are getting excited about the arms build. Stunning things is very good, especially if you're pulling a lot of things, trying to go fast. stunning things for 4 seconds, it's going to die in 4 seconds a lot of times. I mean, I think you should probably speak in terms of anything that is stunnable speedrun wise.
And how does shockwave work?
It's a frontal cone. Yeah, it's a frontal cone that can crit and apply deep wounds, stuns everything that it hits, will stun any number of targets in front of it, whether it's 1, 100, 1,000, doesn't matter as long as you hit them with it. It does 2 damage. Who cares as long as it landed?
A frontal cone cleave. Holy crap.
It's kind of like a cone of cold that stuns in a shorter range rather than slows.
Yeah, you have to learn the range of it though, because a lot of people will think it's longer than it is. Because I think it's longer in retail, or when it was like people were using it all the time in retail and stuff. So it's kind of small, but yeah. To speak to Zatar's point, we had like a paladin round up all of Fairlina's room and then just stand there, and then I charge and you buffer shockwave into when your charge is ending, and you stun all the mobs. They're literally all stunnable, and then they just AoE them down. Yeah, it makes the gigapole trivial. Makes it very trivial. So charge into shockwave is very viable for gigapoles.
And then so we haven't mentioned the cooldown. It's 20 seconds. And even if you're just looking at like number, there's also a glyph for it too. So if you're planning to do like crazy chain pulls and stuff, glyph of the shockwave reduces it by 3 seconds. So if you're just like doing numbers, a 4-second stun on a 17-second cooldown, like that doesn't sound fair. Like if any PvPer is going to hear that and they're going to be
like a 20% uptime, 23.
It's insane. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah. PvP wise, they're actually really strong in PvP.
They're literally the rogues of like Wrath is to warriors as TBC is to rogues PvP wise. Like every 2's comp is viable, etc. And you're even good in 5s too. So you're even better than the rogue in TBC.
To some degree. But yeah, the prot warrior, it's really funny because a lot of people are always like respecking and stuff. There's prot warrior specs that like actually are very good in PvP and 3s and stuff. So they have things that allow them to take a bit. Go ahead.
That's good now. Like prot warrior could actually be really good now. Like I think it's going to be a real big thing in
I think you got to factor in like the damage difference for people listening though. You like right now, like you're not doing like one-shot damage.
And I think you were going towards that with revenge a second ago, right?
Yeah. So like you just do damage now. Like that's the thing. Across your entire character, you just do damage, and so many other ways too. But that's like if you're looking at your talent tree, it's like all damage almost.
It's all crit, like 15% crit for everything.
Like every ability. And then like, this thing, it's some weird shield bash thing. Oh wait, your shield slam does 10% damage. Oh, this is some weird, reflect thing. Oh wait, I'm getting 100% increased or 100% chance basically at all times to be enraged and just do more damage. Like,
when Simon Eyes came on the show, he said he tried to fight a prot warrior on the beta and killed himself with the reflect.
Yep.
Yeah. And that's not even counting like the 6K revenges that come through. Like they're actually disgusting in PvP.
And it scales. Like, and that's the fun thing too. If you want to get into like doing a lot of damage on your warrior on specific fights, there is an avenue for you to make gear sets that are going to be vastly different than a normal set if you're trying to do a lot of damage. I would not recommend it your first raids or progression, anything like that. But if you want to go into a 10-man, you want to carry your undergeared friends, we're talking, this is going to be a full expansion, right? If you want to come in with like phase 3 gear and go into an axe 10-man, put a bunch of damage gear on, you put a bunch of strength on. Strength is increasing your shield block value. So one point of strength gives half a shield block value, and before all your modifiers that increase your shield block value and your talents and all that, that scale your strength. So if you just go on 70 upgrades or something, slap on any gear set, it just has like minimum 1,000 shield block value, almost 800 because of strength. And then when you factor in, you just stack a bajillion strength. Your revenge is hitting harder. Your shockwave's hitting harder. Thunderclap's hitting harder. The shield block value feeds into your shield slam. Devastate hits harder. Everything hits harder. You're just owning. So the
arms prot spec could kind of be compared to the dual wield Fury Prod from classic vanilla. Like, you don't want to do it until you have enough gear to support it, right? But it could be like a huge thing for the actual raid if you can support it.
I'm curious how Zirene looks at it, because the way I would look at it with the revenge build is in any situation where you're not progressing, you're not like really worried about dying, and you're not worried about Shockwave being good, I think you can use that build. But me personally, I wouldn't even necessarily always run dungeons with that build, because I'm going to be with 3 pumpers that are not waiting 1 second. They're not waiting for me to block and press revenge. They want to go, 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 go. And I can get through the entire instance faster with Shockwave than that build, even though my personal DPS would have been way higher as revenge. So I'm curious, now you've probably done more testing in raids. How does it look like single target? If we don't care about survivability, are we trying to fit in arms on every single, or the arms prot every single target fight we can, just for more damage?
Yeah. So basically, you're talking about like if it's like, hey, we're going to have you tank like, it makes none or something like that, right?
Yeah.
It's just those types of situations. Like I'm already looking at two tanking Nax and having your off tank literally be only there for 2 fights or 3 fights. Yep. Patchwork, Thaddeus, and then maybe KT, but you can solo tank that as well. But if you need Ice Tomb with everything on you, then it's GG. So there's like only 2 fights that really require 2 tanks. So your off tank is like Feral Druid or Frost DK, and your main tank is either Prot Paladin or Prot Warrior is what we're looking at right now. And the Prot Warrior one offers a lot more damage, and all you have to do to kind of prop it up is just double to triple Rogue, just rotate tricks and just keep moving, right? You're talking about waiting 1 second. The Rogues don't have to wait for that. They can just run in tricks and just rotate it. 10-second duration, 30-second cooldown. So you can kind of shore up the weakness of the arms prot if you really want to, but the damage increase that it brings to bosses, it seems to be worth it compared to Shockwave, unless we can find really big ways to abuse Shockwave and Gigapole more than one time, is what we're looking at. So yeah, it seems it's really good. It's very effective. It's a ton of DPS. It's literally going to embarrass DPSers in like heroics and stuff like that. We're trying to see if it can like embarrass raiders in raids. As it just does just insane damage.
I feel like it'll be pretty big in 10 mans, right? But like 25 mans, sure. If you're taking a 25 man boss, do you really want to be the arms spec? Because anybody who doesn't know, the arms prot spec goes into prot like how many points? Like 18 or 20?
Something like that, yeah.
And then mostly in arms. I feel like you'll only be doing that on older like 25 man content, like what you past it.
You have to think about what those talents in deeper prot give you. There aren't many that add to your survivability, right? That's not the warrior's forte at all. Vigilance isn't adding to your own survivability. The shield reflect isn't really adding to your survivability. Shockwave doesn't really add to your survivability. In terms of like living on bosses, there really isn't much that you're getting there, right? It's like you get a little bit more stats out of the talent that gives you like stamina and stuff, but you already get one of those similar talents at the end of arms that you'll be picking up. Like the vitality talent is 9% stamina, 6% strength, and 6 expertise, but you're going to be picking up the 4% strength, 4% stamina, 4 expertise. So you're really losing 2 expertise, 5% stamina, and 2% strength in terms of just actual defensive power. Maybe some spell damage reduction, but you are going to go down to improved defensive stance and get the 10% increased damage. So you're really losing like devastate, chance to crit on some abilities, your little thorns, shockwave, a little bit of stamina, strength, and 2 expertise, and ability to charge and intercept in defensive stance. And so like that's really what you're losing. You're not really losing survivability at all, right? You're just losing the ability to keep things grouped easier than the other prot warrior.
Now, here's where I'm going to be a doomer now and be kind of the sad person. In your average raid, though, if you're just tanking a normal boss,
doomed anyway.
your prot warrior should be playing deep prot because the increased health, the chance to critically block, these things are going to matter more than
critical
personal
block, yeah.
DPS 99% of the time. And their personal DPS isn't going to be the difference in killing a boss. Again, of course, a cleave fight, it's going to add up a lot more and maybe factor in more. But if we go past cleave to AoE, well, you're kind of great at shockwaving things anyway. So I would be the doomer there and say, be careful. You can grief your raid by playing the arms build. If you're going to have less threat on AoE, it is not better threat in AoE because you do not have shockwave, and you are, you're not doing something that is helping the raid unless you're actually like speed clearing or, you're on farm and you're having fun and you're killing stuff fast. Perfectly fine. But progression, I don't think we should be showing up with the arms prot on hard hitting bosses and you get overkilled by 50 and they're like, man, how, why is your health so low? Like, why are you like, what's going on? And it's just like, look at my damage though.
Hey, if it dies faster, there's less opportunity for it to do damage,
I feel like it'll be really cool on 10 mans though, right off the bat.
It's going to be really cool until people are like upset the tank is doing more damage than them, because that doesn't feel good as a DPSer. Like I don't know, doesn't feel good. Not at all. I don't know how many logs you've looked at where like the prot warrior is doing more damage than everybody else in the raid. This spec is like so good that Alondo's literally playing it on stream a bunch, and you know how much he likes damage. And so yeah, it's pretty insane how much it does. I am scared because I don't know if this is one of the things they might actually touch for warriors in the first phase. I know that it probably won't stay for like the remaining phases afterwards. Like I don't think they will have the survivability for like surviving Algalon and other bosses that hit extremely hard. This is most like a Nax exclusive beginning of the game thing that we're seeing right now. Whether it'll extend past that, I don't think so, but some people will try to make it work for sure, and maybe it will. But somebody asked about if you can level as this. Yeah, actually, the preferred leveling spec for warriors seems to be prot now.
Hell yeah, I've done it.
The guy who does rested XP tactics, he's literally doing marathons of leveling prot warrior speed level on beta from 1 to 80 as fast as he can, and it takes him like 47 hours to go all the way from 1 to like mid 70s or I think 80. So it's very fast. Thunderclap is very, very strong. Revenge hitting 2 targets is very, very strong. And natural cleave, a 15% in your talents early on, is very strong as well. So the build is very good for leveling.
Yep. And
yeah, I think, well, I was just gonna say the best way to put it is, that meme of like the two Chad, there's like the Chad and like the big Chad bar or whatever he's called, and like there's gonna be like the other tanks are like, no, you're not allowed to do that, you're a prot warrior, you're supposed to be bad. And then it's gonna be like the prot warrior Giga Chad, like doing top damage on a specific
presses one button, out damages the raid, like presses 50 buttons, does less damage than the Ret Paladins, like the other tanks are sitting there.
That's what I would say. The prot warrior, I think it's fair to say they're probably the most fun tank. Everyone likes things differently, but I think they're the most fun tank, probably across the average player's taste, I would guess. But
yeah, they're very, very fun. Once you get past the discrimination for playing warrior tank, once you get past the stigma.
Well, some people, I think it'll go fast for like dungeons. It's just raid.
Oh yeah, it's everybody knows.
Dude, it's fast for questing.
Everybody accepted that they were like the best dungeon tank. Like even private server players were like, "Oh yeah, they're the best dungeon tanks." And I'm like, Nax is just a big dungeon, dude. Everything in there is stunnable, tauntable. Like that was the difference between raids and dungeons, was how much can I CC these things, and are bosses like actually something that matters threat wise? Can I taunt it, and like the mechanics and stuff? It's like, yeah, Nax is just a big dungeon, and that's why warriors are so good.
Well, and no, I have leveled up to like 74 on 2 different warriors, like 2 different copies of my warrior. And just to let everybody know, whether you're questing, dungeon spamming, solo dungeoning, duo dungeoning, no matter what you're doing as a warrior leveling in Classic, if you have gear, if you have at least ZA gear, like BT gear, and you have enough block and everything else, at least to 74 with that gear, it is crazy to level as anything but arms prot. Literally, you could just pull everything in an area and kill it immediately with taking minimal damage. It was an eye opener to me when I did that with my warrior, and then made like a because my rogue's on a different account, so I couldn't move him over, but I made a template rogue, and it was like literally night and day. I was like just destroying every quest content, everything that I ran into. Nothing was a problem. And then all of a sudden I get on this template warrior, our rogue, and I'm like, dude, I have to use vanish on cooldown because I'm just dying. Like, I can't do anything. Like, what is this? So yeah, it's an OP. Like, when I first played the warrior, I just thought like, oh man, they just nerfed everything for Wrath. This is like retail again. Like, what the hell? But no, warrior is just that OP, at least for the first 4 to 5 levels, if you have prot gear. That was all I wanted to say about that.
Yeah. Oh, it's really broken. Like, my GM is constantly trying to find new farms and solos. So he's like soloing Utgard Keep all the time at 70, and now he's got a new thing where it's like, well, what do you do after that? Now he's soloing all of Drakthorn Keep at level 76, which is the same level as the mobs.
What's your GM's name? Does he have does he have the YouTube channel where he doesn't actually explain it? He just shows his runs?
Yep. Yeah. Shows his runs and shows the stuff at the beginning. He shows the talent build and stuff like that.
Oh, dude, tell him to hire you to voice over his videos, because they would be king if he just talked and explained what was going on during, because those are money. But yeah,
that's basically what I mean, I linked to his video and I said, hey, I got this guy did it before me, but he kind of didn't say anything. And then I said, okay, well, I tested it with a lot of different gear, pre-raid, what do you do it on a budget? But if you want to see this Chad in really good gear, just do it faster than me. Go look at him.
He just plays trance or like, just plays trance and just goes. I don't know why he doesn't explain it. He speaks good English. He's Danish though.
Yeah, but, he just obviously doesn't want to do it. But if he partnered with another person, I'm just throwing it out there. Like, well,
I mean, he could just explain it himself. I think he's good enough for that.
But I mean, it would be huge because, like, I guarantee a lot of people turn that off when they're not getting explained what's going on. Like, I mean, it'd be huge if he partnered with somebody else. But that was all I was going to say. Or if he just did it himself.
Now he's soloing all of Drakthorn Keep at level 76. So
yeah, I just watched that video today while I ate dinner. It was wonderful. Okay, so best suited for, like, I feel like just as the rage mechanic, like main tank is what you want your warrior for, but are they okay? Like, I've had multiple people on my stream tell me, oh, they're awesome off tanks, but I just don't see that. I want to know from you guys.
It just depends what you're off tanking. So, like, take a fight like Patchwork. They are horrible off tanks in terms of like threat, because
they basically need tricks. Constantly.
If they're supposed to stay second, it's like a mix up at the start of the fight of like, okay, we need to make sure this guy like has enough threat, but we don't want him to pull past the main tank. It actually becomes annoying. So I'd say the rage thing is a problem. And then I'd also say that in terms of what you're respecing into, you kind of have a similar, I mean, it kind of depends how much you care, but it's a similar problem maybe to Rhett, where a lot of people are not super excited to have an extra arms, an extra fury, or an extra Rhett when you don't need to be tanking something. And they're not going to, we keep talking about how many cool things you can do. It all revolves around getting hit. You need revenge to be proccing. You need rage. You're reflecting thorns back. Like, I can't tell you how useless it feels. Like, even on trash, I did a run with Zirene even. if he pulls the trash pack, I might as well walk away. Because even if I press Thunderclap, if he did more snap threat than me, I'm not getting hit. I don't have enough rage. I'm useless. I can't press anything. You're just worthless. There's no revenge proc.
What's your AoE cooldown as a warrior now? Is it less than 10? Is it down to 5?
You mean
4 Thunderclap is 4 seconds, I think?
No.
It's longer now.
Your AoE taunt, sorry.
Oh.
Yeah,
3 minutes.
What, 3 minutes?
Oh, okay, that's
Which
not
is
bad.
really good, but yeah.
Yeah, okay, so that's what I thought. So like basically like you just don't really want them as an off tank. Unless they're going to take a bunch of ads like as arms prod.
Even they are fine off tanking, like even on a fight like Sartharian, they're perfectly fine off tank when there are ads for them to tank. But you just have to go by a fight basis. Is there something for this guy to do? If there's ads there for him, they're going to be great. If there's not, they're going to be great maybe late game damage wise, but then late game, then you have to start to question survivability, which we don't know for sure about. But
late game, they could swap to DPS and pump.
Yeah,
whereas early game,
swap, yes, if
DK
they full main swap,
could swap to DPS and pump.
Yes, so it's kind of a weird, like which off tank you want to do damage. DKs are going to do good damage off tank the whole time. Warrior and like Prot people are not excited to have them respec to damage, even though they're going to do fine. It's not going to be at the top, right? Especially when you're not going to have gear, right? It's going to be really bad.
And this is what I was talking about, where like I really think for phase 1, the two categories are like, for at least the top level, your off tank is either a feral druid or it's a frost DK, and your main tank is either a prot warrior or a prot paladin. The reason I say that is because the way that I define off tank is they will not always be tanking something. And how good are they when they're not tanking something, right? How good is that class at that role? If you're on Meixna, what is that person doing? And how good are they at it? If you're a prot paladin, you're hating your life. If you're a prot warrior, you're hating your life. If you're a blood DK, you probably accidentally pulled threat. Like, it's like these things are problems that you're going to have, and you're going to be bored out of your mind if you're playing that. So if you're an off tank like a feral druid, you just swap gear and you go. If you're playing the frost DK spec for off tanking, you just swap gear and you DPS, swap gear presence, and boom. So warriors don't really have that same luxury. A lot of their damage in the specs come from procs or a deep talent like Bloodthirst or Mortal Strike to allow them to deal damage. So you kind of have to be spec'd into it to really get the most out of it. So you can't just swap gear and go on a prot warrior. Sadly,
that's like a speed run thing, though.
Yes, it's very much so a speed run thing.
Can go into dual spec and swap their gear, but think of Ret and prot warrior as very gear dependent. You're going to be so sad. You're never going to have good off-spec gear compared to other people. You're never going to have good weapons. Are you going to respec to Fury as a prot warrior and have 2 tiers behind two-handed weapons? Where are you getting these two-handed weapons from? You're just going to, who's going to give them to you?
The problem is that people will just say, well, it's better than him just standing there hitting it as a prot warrior, which is what he would have done anyway. I mean,
absolutely.
Your boy plays 4 prot paladins right now and has to bring Annihilator because there's nothing else for him to do on half the fights he doesn't tank. So it's like, I know what it's like to smack a boss for 160 damage.
Any prot warrior that's respectable is going to push to get a two-handed weapon for PvP. So they should just be able to go arms.
Well, any respectable prot warrior, any respectable prot warrior is going to pick up two-handers because they're going to say, when I'm useless, I'm Fury, and now I'm the best DPS dealer. The best DPS in the game.
Later, right?
Yeah, because it's funny because as prot loses value, Fury gains value, or if I guess vice versa. As Fury gets better and better, prot gets worse and worse. So for example, even if prot warrior could tank everything in ICC and stuff like that, it still would lose value because you're bringing more Furies and more arms warriors at that point because they're actually good. So the big unique thing of like sundering trash very quickly doesn't mean as much, right? Shattering Throw obviously has value regardless of the number of warriors you have.
Which is a huge thing we didn't even talk about.
Yeah, actually funny because people originally were fighting me where they were like, why would you ever bring a prot warrior? Just bring a blood DK and bring Hysteria. And I'm like, there's nothing a blood DK does adds more damage than what a warrior does. And then when you talk about Hysteria or Unholy Frenzy, Shattering Throw is 20% reduced armor on a boss for all of your physical damage dealers for the duration. And I've recently been doing this where like all the builds I see online for prot warrior have like 3 in improved heroic strike, like 5 in deflection, 3 in improved heroic strike, and then they get like 2 in imp charge, and then they get impale and deep wounds. So the 3 points in imp heroic strike, actually you do not need those. I slap those into tactical mastery, which allows me to immediately swap to battle stance and start Shattering Throw immediately, and then swap back without having to get hit or rely on hitting the thing and starting with less rage. Because one of the things that a prot warrior and prot paladin player on private servers told me was he actually thought that beta was bugged because he was like, this warrior generates like 4 times the amount of rage that his full ICC geared warrior does getting hit on private servers. Because he's like, getting hit generates so much rage for you on beta that he actually thought it was bugged or thinks it's bugged.
See,
and we don't need any of those things that reduce rage cost anymore.
I just feel like, okay, so everybody says that like it's bugged and private servers were this, but literally like classic vanilla was the only thing they had to rebuild. They have all the actual backups from everything after classic vanilla. Like, so what they're bringing in is supposed to be the right thing. It might be bugged, but like we have to wait for them to figure out if it is or not. Like,
I don't think it's bugged. I just think he told me that private servers had less we're getting less rage. I was like, I'm getting hit hard and I feel myself getting the rage that I normally get right now. It's just that my attacks are actually generating a lot too. So it's
it's like a tinfoil hat theory, but I feel like private server players tweaked things and then shared builds, and then you know, all of a sudden everything gets a little wishy-washy. But that's a different conversation.
There's definitely 2 things on private servers that were a problem, and it was rage generation for warriors, and vigilance is bugged on some of the private servers where it's not redirecting the same amount of threat. Some people were saying it's like 5% instead of the 10%. It's doing like a 10% difference, 5 taken from them, 5 added to you. And somebody's saying like that's for sure a thing on Warmane, and that prot warriors don't really get fixed because they're not a popular class in the first place. So hey, we should talk about vigilance for 1 second. This shit's going to be really clever. You can do some really clever shit with vigilance.
I'd explain what it is first though before you say it.
Vigilance is a buff that has no cooldown. You place it on a person, only one person at a time. So you choose a buddy. That person gets 3% reduced damage. Doesn't stack with the Discipline Priest ability that does that. So that part of it isn't that big of a deal. But Vigilance transfers 10% of their threat to you. So it's better than Hand of Salve, right? You put it on whoever is chasing you in threat with a mouse over macro, and their threat starts becoming yours. But the additional part of it is whenever the person who has Vigilance on them gets hit, it refreshes your taunt's cooldown immediately. And taunt is off GCD, and we were able to do things like on KT. KT is tauntable. So I generated the threat on KT. The Paladin taunted it off me. I put Vigilance on him. He had enough of a threat lead that Vigilance did not matter for his threat, right? Nobody was going to catch him. And when all of the little Anubricon guys came in, taunt is a 30-yard range. I was literally like, taunt, that thing's mine now. That thing's mine now. Literally infinite taunts from a 30-yard range, because the person that I have Vigilance on is the person tanking the boss now. So I keep getting the cooldown of it over and over and over and over again. So I was able to have really long range taunts constantly. And you could group up any number of things as long as the person who has Vigilance on them keeps getting hit. So there's probably going to be some really clever things you can do with it.
Now, well, I got a crazy one. Can two prot warriors vigilance each other?
I don't think so, but I'm not sure because I don't
sure.
think two prot warriors have ever been in the same grade together.
I don't think so either.
In theory, you could infinitely pancake a mob as long as they're both taking damage, right? One taunts, the other taunts. If there's like any ad hitting either.
Oh, and you're talking like stand across the room and make the poor
boss is in the
melee
middle.
just run after him.
They're supposed to be taunt DRs. They're supposed to be taunt DRs, but they're not in.
They added that specifically to prevent this problem because people were actually doing that.
Yeah, I was doing
so you're
this with
saying
Rugs.
we're playing World of Warcraft Pong.
Right.
Yeah. Basically, like Vesuvius, we had all the ads die. I was like, no, I'm going to taunt this. Somebody else taunted off me in a few seconds, so I literally ran because taunt is a 30-yard range. So I was just like, I taunted Vesuvius. He's running at me. Rugs just taunts him on the other side, and I was like, well, somebody else taunts it, and then I taunt it back. And as long as you have, because taunt's like a 8-second cooldown.
Yep.
For almost every class. And then like multiple classes have 2 taunts, like Paladin and DK. So it was just like we were literally making Vesuvius run around in circles and not kill anybody for the last like 15%. It was ridiculous. And so taunt DRs are supposed to be in, where eventually the mob becomes immune to taunt and can't be taunted. It wasn't happening.
I don't know if I like this because it sounds like it hurts melee DPS and gives.
I don't think it's going to be a thing. I think they need to get rid of it.
Your character, man. Just follow the boss.
You got to chase it. Oh, it's too much.
Oh man. All right. So we already covered dungeons are going to be awesome in multiple different specs for tanks. Like, where do they shine? I'm assuming it's anything with heavy mitigation for a deep prot tank that shines, because we already really covered like ads and stuff and like multiple target.
I say AoE control is one of their shining points now with their taunt, shockwave, etc. Which is like Zatar was saying, complete opposite of how it is in TBC. Then their other big thing is just they add damage to the raid. They just added a large amount of damage from themselves, but also sunders, shattering throw, and mobility. So that's really kind of the thing that prot warriors bring.
No, and this is where I got in trouble. And we might want to talk about critical block a little bit. I personally think that prot warrior is the most likely tank to get one shot. Not
really. Oh, okay.
Not
I think so too.
From spells or from. From actual melee,
dying to the boss, like from any source of damage,
because they don't hit an actual cooldown.
There's some situations that are really good for them. Like, for example, let's say every 40 seconds you take a big burst of damage. Well, they're nuts because their ability every 40 seconds shield block is pretty strong if you can block. And if you're taking, physical attack, let's say you're taking magic damage. This is probably the most common example that people bring up. Some sort of tank buster that can't be blocked or magic damage. Your prot warrior, what does he do that the other tanks don't do better? And I want to stress, this is not saying that your prot warrior isn't viable or that they can't tank the boss, but a blood DK has a really broken talent that says, whenever you take damage that would take you below 35% or damage taken while you were at 35% is reduced by 5%, and then it stacks 3 times. That's up to 15%. That is giga broken. What that basically reads, anytime your health total matters, because as a tank, you just don't want to die. Anytime you may have died, let's just start taking 15% less damage when it matters most. That's insane. Paladins have a cheat death every 2 minutes. And then they have a talent that's kind of like the DK one, but it's a little worse. Turns out it was a little worse than we thought too. It doesn't quite like the DK one. Any damage that's getting you low or killing you is like sliced. The Paladin one, there's like a bunch of math around like, okay, once you get to the low health point, then it starts reducing your damage taken. So even though it makes it sound like you're going to take 20% less damage when you get low, it doesn't. And just to be clear, so in case people don't know, the Paladin talent says that when you die, you get healed, scaling on your defense, and it's a 2-minute cooldown, and you don't die anymore. It's a cheat death. And that same talent gives you a damage reduction as you're getting hit below 35%. So long story short,
Yeah, that's a huge one for Paladin.
bears have giga armor, bears have giga health, paladins have a cheat death, and your DK has a big DR when they get low on health. And you could probably argue, I think most would probably agree, that the DK's cooldowns are better defensively than the warrior. Not in every case, probably overall.
They're smaller versions. A lot of times, like Icebound Fortitude and Vampiric Blood, but their cooldown is lower to the point where it matters more because they're up more frequently, right? Like if I had a cooldown that gave me 100% increased HP, but it had 10 times the cooldown of Last Stand, it's not better than Last Stand. It's overkill, right?
Yeah. And I think a lot of people don't realize that if they haven't played a tank, they don't realize like a Nightmare Seed is enough. Like I don't need my Nightmare Seed to give me 30,000 health. The little bit does save you and you feel it. I feel safe when I press that button on Brutalis. You have to tank to see it, to know it, but you feel safe.
A higher quantity of cooldowns is better than like better cooldowns
100%.
most of the time.
Yeah,
100%. And so basically what I'm getting at is, again, the weakness, I would say, of the Prot Warrior and why I am not going to main it. I mean, I could always reroll. I hate dying. It's just the thing I hate most. And I really feel like Prot Warrior is the most likely to get one shot. But that doesn't say they can't tank bosses, not to say they're not viable. But I would say when we're talking about like the specialty of the Prot Warrior, I think that's, I love all the other things we've talked about that makes them really cool, but it's a reality that I believe is true. But again, I'm curious about what you guys think.
We'll see. I feel like you're going to come back to the brown before it's all said and done.
It depends on if they can live.
Yeah.
Well, okay.
Which again, if they can live, that doesn't mean that they're the least likely to get one shot. I'm not saying they're not going to live.
But you were talking about,
if you're talking like even just as an extreme example for Nax, Patchwork Hateful Tank, Warrior's the worst.
Yeah.
Warrior's by far the worst. Druids are actually good at it. Blood DKs are the best. Paladins, they have a cheat death. So they can even just, they're fantastic.
By Hateful Tank, you're talking about the off tanks because they're taking the the hateful strikes, but
the
main tanking Patchwork, fine, right?
Yeah, they take less DTPS, so take less damage.
Well, and this is where I brought up shield block. We'll keep going. We'll talk about critical block after.
Yeah, all I was like kind of pointing out to is that basically, and maybe I don't know, like is there more bosses in Wrath that have the majority magical damage, or is there more bosses? Probably nobody knows this, but or is there more bosses that have majority physical damage? Because it feels like basically when you go magical, you're like really hurting. Like you want to give that off to a DK or a Pally.
And I would even say, don't just say physical. You need to block it as a warrior, or else one of their defensives goes away. So even some of the tank busters that can't be blocked, the warrior is down another cooldown.
So that could be where the private server trend of going away from warriors began, right there. It's
not for just no reason. I think it's not just that, because keep in mind, we're talking about how good the damage of a brought warrior is, how they add damage to the raid. There's a reason they're not run across the board, because if they're the tankiest and they do the most damage and they are bringing the most, well, not in all situations, prop pal is pumped too, but if they're doing tons of damage, they're bringing a ton of utility. They're not just the god tank. There's give and take. So I just think it's important to be aware of where the downside is for the prop warrior.
I love it. Love it. Okay, so what about gearing and glyphs? And then I know Zatar's, we got to sign Zatar out after this, but gearing, glyphs, and races. Let's just knock that out.
Well, block value has a lot of value, especially against the things that you should be tanking, which are tiny hits. Block value also adds to your
opposite from TBC, right?
Yeah. Block value adds to your, literally shield block doubles whatever block value you have, makes it 100% chance to just make your block value relevant, and your block value becomes thorns. So strength, block value, very, very strong. Stamina, same thing. your full mitigation stats usually are a little bit lower prio, like comparatively. I'm not sure how much we're going to be wanting things like armor pen and stuff like that in the future, because threat really isn't as much of an issue. Right now you have like a lot of crit. You want some armor pen from like gladiator gear. Gearing wise as well, I think actually that's one thing I do want to touch on. The misnomer, this is for people who don't really understand like tanking. When people say defense cap, that's not really what they mean. They mean uncritable. Yep. And the highest crit chance that anything in the game has that isn't an enemy player is 5.6%. So all you need is your defense when you mouse over it to say reduces chance to be crit by 5.6%. But you also need that number it doesn't just have to all be from defense. You can add that number with your resilience. So if my resilience is 3% chance to not be crit, and then I have 2.6% chance to not be crit from defense, but I have like 100 less defense than the defense cap, I'm still uncritable, which is exactly what the defense cap is. Now, defense still does have value past the cap. The cap just means that you're losing 1/5 of the effectiveness of defense. You're still gaining block, dodge, parry, and miss chance. You're just not getting chance to not be crit when you get more defense beyond the cap. So defense is still good if that gear also has other things on it. That is also good for you. So currently in TBC, defense is like one of the best things for prop paladins still, even when they're capped. Block value or block rating and defense are like their best mitigation stats.
That's something that's huge. That took a lot of time to sink in with me for TBC, and I'm sure other people are as smooth brained as me. But
yeah, I get the question all the time. Like when I open my character sheet, and I don't think any of my characters ever have, aside from my prop paladin, and even then, sometimes I'm just leaning on the gladiator weapon. I don't think any of my characters hit defense cap in all of their gear sets. So people will ask me all the time, like, wait, you're critical. Like, what are you doing? Like running around with this gear set? Like, actually, people don't realize that defense cap is a misnomer. It's really just uncritable, and you can get that from just defense.
Well, and on top of that,
or from more than just defense.
The part that that confused me the most was when resilience came into the game, and I remember asking Yip, I was like, well, could you just use a whole bunch of resilience? And he didn't really explain to me what it actually is. But what it actually is like the bosses and mobs and different things have like a set amount chance to crit. So like once you hit that with resilience, it's worthless after that. Like it does nothing. Like maybe it makes a little less damage when you get crit, but they don't crit you. So it doesn't matter how much damage it negates, you know? And so it's a hard thing for somebody who doesn't tank and doesn't get it. Like, and maybe I'm just the only dumb one, but I'm putting myself out there. Like it took me a long time to understand actually what that meant and like how you could throw in a couple resilience items into a tank set, but like it can't be a tank set.
Yeah, like I think this is why like I brought this up for gearing. I think that personally I'm going to use 2 pieces of gladiator gear throughout pretty much all of phase 1, minus like once I'm full bis and everything comes together, because it's going to prop up my resilience and my uncritable by a lot, right? Like the 2 set bonus is 100 resilience now with I think AP mixed in there, so it's also offensive. But yeah, I think it's going to be part of my boss set too, even from the beginning, because it's very hard if you're not using resilience to hit uncritable in Wrath of the Lich King at the start. Like the template gear, you got a
paladin, right?
Yeah.
DK and Bear doesn't have to worry about it at all, and DKs have a pretty nice glyph early that gives them a bunch of defense. So it's
you mean the runes,
the sigil, sorry, not glyph.
Oh, the sigil. Oh, okay, yeah. I was thinking because like a lot of
their enchants, but
exactly, their enchant gives them 26 or 25 if you're not dual wielding, just straight defense, not defense rating, actual just defense. So those usually prop up DKs pretty heavily.
So as far as stats, would I be correct in saying that if you're hitting your caps in dodge, parry, block together, which is kind of confusing for people. But if you're hitting those caps, strength is probably your most important stat, not agi. Or maybe stamina is your most important stat. Like, because strength adds to block value. I don't know. I'm curious.
It depends on, again, what you're trying to do and what your guild's level is at. If I'm talking to like an average player and I'm trying to make sure that they're not dying, I'm just saying all you care about is crit immunity and then stamina. Now, of course, there's going to be some items
threat isn't
that
as
are
much
going to
of a
have
problem, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
And there's going to be some items that are like, well, this item has like 50 dodge and you only lose 10 stamina. And I'll be like, okay, well, we'll take the 50 dodge. That's a lot more dodge than stamina. But in general, it's like full stamina stack, like stamina. And I would even recommend, again,
especially even for healers too. If you have like lower class healers in your group too, right?
Well, I mean, you just don't want to die. Healers are cracked and wrath. Just give them a chance to save you. Like, that's the way stamina is, like, especially early. And I feel like it's going to be this way for most progression as you're going through. Healers are so strong in wrath. They heal so hard. They have cooldowns. They're just cracked. We're already hearing people talk about 1 healing, 2 healing things, 1 healing 10 mans, 2 healing 25s. It's like, okay, healers are super strong. I don't need to avoid like every single attack and slowly save the mana over a long fight. Of course, that's nice, and it is going to save me when I take a barrage of damage.
Or when you do something like Yogg, Zero Light, something super, super long.
But stamina, like, I mean, even Yogg Zero, it's going to feel like, it always seems like in Classic, people are like, oh, people used to have mana problems. Oh, people used to gem MP5. Ha, ha, ha. Like, Yogg Zero, we're all full mana. Like, there's no mana pot in combat anymore. That besides, one per fight.
Yeah.
But you're not going to be spamming them and stuff. So we'll see if it's different. But I am, until proven wrong, and I'm always going to recommend always go stamina as your top priority. And then, of course, there's a balance to things to where, like, you're going to take a socket bonus that gives you like a bunch of like 12 stamina, and put an agility gem in it. If it hits your meta, it's not, you just turn away from everything. But most of the time you want stamina. And shout out to armor too. Armor is reliable. It always reduces your damage. Dodge and parry and block is not reliable. Always. You can get one shot and you might not get lucky enough to avoid anything. Anyway, stamina shilling ended. What do you guys think about stamina? I'm a pretty big stamina shill.
Yeah, I like stamina a lot. I have to move away from it, like, sadly, for spell power and agility on Druid, because threat is just a thing, and in Wrath of the Lich King it's much less of a thing at the start. So stamina is 100% the way to go. You want to have, like, and that's really satisfying for me. I like having the 35, the 40k HP pool. That feels good to me. That's the tank fantasy for me. I like that. So I love stamina. I love it a lot. One of those things that, like, there's not a lot that makes my monkey brain come out and go like, ooh, big bar. Like, that stamina is the thing that does it for me. It's not like big numbers or anything like that, like a DPS. I'm just like,
I just remember tanks always like, look at me, I'm at 22k.
One thing in back in retail Wrath, tanks were stacking stamina through the entirety of the expansion. Every single tier, they were just maximizing stamina. The other stats just weren't as important, and there are several tank buster fights in every tier of content that will stress your stamina levels.
Yeah,
starting from Sarth 3D specifically, into Ulduar, where you have plenty of fights. XT hits hard, Sealbreaker hits hard. Just so many fights hit hard, and will punish you for not having a lot of stamina on a tank.
Yeah. All right. Well, just one thing to throw in, like, that you guys talked about, we haven't mentioned on the podcast, and I'm throwing it in here like willy-nilly in the middle of this, but potions change quite a bit. You can only use 1 pot per fight, and until you die or the fight's over, your pot just never comes off of cooldown. So there's no more chugging. And on top of that, people usually pre-pot to do that. But on top of that, we go back to the vanilla system of resistance pots, where you could actually pre-pop a shadow resist, frost resist pot, and then it stays for the whole duration instead of a short little thing from like the way they changed it to TBC. So I thought like that's something that I haven't mentioned on the pod that I think is like really interesting because it threw me through a loop with TBC because I only PvE'd in both vanilla and Wrath, not TBC.
So in Wrath, it starts the practice of pre-potting, which still remains in retail to this day, 14 years later or whatever. So you can only pop one potion in combat. So the idea is right before you enter combat, we're talking like a second before, 2 seconds before, 3 seconds before, you pop a potion and can use that in your opening salvo of attacks. And basically that allows you to skip the one potion in combat for that particular instance and also use it later on in the fight. So you basically get 2 potions per boss fight. So that can be, say in BC, you have 2 Iron Shield potions, where you're only supposed to really have 1. And whereas in BC and in Classic, we chain chugged Stone Shields and now Iron Shields to get a large portion of damage reduction through the entire fight, just popping them off cooldown. Kind of have to be more intelligent now in Wrath of when we need either defensive potions or offensive potions.
Which is nice for knowing how many consumes to bring to a raid too.
I think it's important to mention, I think tanks, it's probably the most important pre-pot in the sense that it lasts 2 minutes. So it doesn't feel fair, but if you pre-pot on like a 4-minute fight, you have 100% Iron Shield uptime. If you miss it, if you accidentally pull too fast and you didn't drink your armor potion, you just lose that massive armor potion for 2 full minutes.
And the armor potion is also an offensive potion for a lot of the classes. Plated armor, armor to the teeth. You get AP from popping armor pots, so you have basically extra AP for the entire fight.
Yeah, for like Fury Warriors and them stuff, because they're probably going to be taking...
Well, even the problem too.
Well, yeah, but I mean, like any DPS warrior, it feels like since that's the first 5 points in the prot tree, they're going to take the thing that makes their armor value give them more attack power, like, and it's going to make them hopefully only roll on plate gear.
So maybe that'll do more damage than a speed potion in a long fight. Who knows?
I don't know what the numbers are for Wrath, but in BC, Iron Shield potion was like 8% DR. It is not trivial in the slightest. It's almost another defensive stance on top of your already pretty beefy stats. So if you happen to miss that pre-pot, and again, I don't know how powerful the Wrath version of the armor pot is. It is pretty significant.
And I would heavily the big one is Patchwork. Patchwork is actually a fight that is long, and it's actually a fight where your tanks can die. Of like all the fights, it's like the biggest one. My Axe and the 2. Make sure to pre-pot on those fights. I mean, just all of them, honestly. Even the fights like Grand Widow Firulina, if your raid goofs up the mechanic, the boss can enrage and go nuts. Especially early on if you don't have much DPS. I mean, it kind of matters, I would say, especially as a tank. So just, you're the one pulling anyway. Make sure you pre-pot with your pull timer. Yeah, it's really good.
All right, so
somebody's going to make a weak aura. Somebody's going to make a weak aura, guarantee it. That tells you when your tank pre-potted.
Oh yeah.
Air horn. It's like some my buddy always
pre-potting. He's about to go.
Yeah, he's about to go, right? Because people will do like pull timers and stuff, and then they don't go like right at the right time. Like they'll pre-pot right before, and then they'll go, or they'll pre-pot like 5 seconds before. Oh,
dude, that's perfect. The air horn would just be like, "All right, we're going, game on." I love that. I love that idea.
Somebody has one for when I pop snappers and shit like that already. Like some of the mages have ones that are like when I pop wings, it tells them. When I pop trinkets or anything like that, it tells them. It's very, very helpful.
Nice.
What are you saying,
so in Wrath and onward, because of the pre-pot conundrum where you can't potion in combat more than once, you really want to be paying close attention and abiding by your pull timers to a T. It's not something where you can just accidentally pull 3 seconds early because you felt like it.
That's a good point too. That's if somebody pulls before the timer, people are, especially DPS that are wanting to parse, are going to be pissed because they didn't get to drink their pot.
Yes, imagine 24 people pre-pot and you get one guy. I didn't pre-pot. Wipe it, and then you're just like, no thanks, man. Sorry.
I don't know how many times
you have
retail
a tank
I have heard
that pulls it 3 seconds early, and the whole raid doesn't get to pre-pot. Corpse and I have known a tank like this before.
You will hear about DPS complaining about their lack of pre-pot if you happen to pull a second early. Yeah. 3 seconds 100%. Is too egregious of a problem.
Yeah. I mean, most people are going to have either a weak or a rule, right? Pre-pot at 2, pre-pot at 1, right, on a pull timer, and then follow the timer.
Can we get a weak aura that just does it for me automatically? Oh.
No, not for pre-potting now.
All right. So can we skip best professions? Is it basically the same as DK?
It's all the same. Yeah.
Okay. Final thoughts before we let Zatar head out.
One thing I will say regarding the pre-pot, you can create a macro that only pops a potion out of combat, or you can also create a macro that'll do the same thing only in combat. So if you want to have a separate pre-pot macro, you can make it so that you can't screw it up and accidentally combat pot.
Yeah, that's especially good. Let's say you're trying to pre-pot with your misdirect or something as a hunter, and you're trying to get it out quick. But if the pull starts, I don't want to pot there. I want to pot at a different time. That's where it's really helpful. Once combat starts, you don't accidentally use it.
Can someone please give me a link to an example of that macro so I can put it in the notes?
I'll just type it out for you in chat.
Perfect. Okay. All right. Well, we're gonna let Zatar go. Zatar, anything to shout out? Anybody to say goodbye to, and definitely tell people where they can find you.
Oh no, just thanks to you all guys. It's been fun. Don't really have too much going on other than a YouTube and a Twitch. So Zatar_WoW on Twitch, Zatar on YouTube. So that's pretty much it, guys. Thanks for having me. Sorry I had to dip.
Awesome.
All good.
And got my 2 favorite classes in for tanking. So
yeah, and we will have all of his links in the notes. So definitely check those if you didn't hear. All right. Thank you so much. All right, I just got to switch our stuff real quick here, but we can move into Paladin, starting with the changes. Oh shit! I just changed it, and it's actually almost perfect, except for Zirene is a rogue, but he has glyphs, so I'm just gonna keep that. And
he does play rogue.
Corpse is a priest. He talked about working on a priest. This works. Yep. We're Gucci. All right.
I've been going overboard on the priest lately in the last couple of weeks.
Look.
Anyway, so I posted an example macro in chat you can use. Stuff that changes for paladins. They kind of they lose their kind of spellcaster tank identity. Right now in TBC, it's just a whole bunch of spells that don't really they're no melee strikes, right? Judgment is a 10-yard range. Holy Shield is just a buff. Consecrate is just an AoE that you put down on the ground that does damage. Your auto attacks do no physical damage. The seal holy damage on top of that is just a whole bunch of extra holy damage. In Wrath, that changes. They now kind of become like a warrior is, and that they have a bunch of melee strikes. So that's probably the biggest change. They have a very strict rotation, GCD capped rotation. So right now they are the only tank that is not GCD capped. They only have 4 abilities that actually do something. You can spend your extra DCs on other stuff for threat, but they're not that important.
Does the one button macro work for Paladin taking too?
It will. I don't know if you need an add-on to extend the length of your macro or something like that. But certainly you could one button macro Paladin. You'd lose a lot of the flexibility if you need to do something different, but it's there. Basically it's a very, very strict rotation. There's no procs or anything that will change what you press. Like a sword and board for a warrior resetting shield slam that will make you want to press shield slam early. That doesn't exist for Paladin.
Sorry, my dog is like having a dream and like really barking loud in his sleep. Okay,
yeah,
so
because of that, they don't care about their focus on spellcaster stats only as they are in TBC. They're more of a traditional melee tank that cares about hit and expertise and strength, whereas they don't.
Does
don't
it
care
strength
much.
turn into spell power? Like, do they even need spell power gear?
No. So yeah, there is a talent deep in Prot that converts strength into spell power. All of their tanking abilities have, I think, spell power coefficient and strength coefficient. So either stat will increase their damage.
Yeah, like 30% of their strength becomes spell power, but things have an AP or attack power ratio on them, right? That's why you can use Berserker's Call and things like that.
And I think just overall strength has a better conversion rate than spell power. So
much higher.
Much higher. So you specifically want strength gear instead of spell power gear.
Yeah, because it's double dipping, because it's giving that into the AP ratio, and then it's giving spell power because of the spell power ratio that you get from strength. So
this is why all the spell power gear plate wise currently is going to be changed to strength gear come pre-patch.
Yes.
And I believe the spell power jewelry that we're all using right now is stuff that will have to change.
Yeah, for the most part. Expertise becomes more valuable. Hit is very good to pick up there. So like Band of the Abyssal Lord isn't bad at all. The Hardened Resolve is great. Neck wise, you can still lean on the one you currently have. Crimson Paragon's cover is still good for cloak. So yeah, like Paladins, you only have to change a few things. Trinkets are probably some of the weirdest ones. Shard is not bad, right? Berserker's Call, if you can get one and people not hate you. It's you just go with Commendation still. There's your enchants might be something you change around as well. Weapon is probably the most important one, because your 51st talent is Hammer of the Righteous, which hits 3 targets, 4 targets if glyphed, and it's based off of your weapon's DPS, not the weapon's actual damage range. So, for example, the 2 weapons that people are mostly looking at are Dragon Encrusted Longsword from Caligos and Muramasa.
Yeah,
it has haste on it, so it's a little faster than that too. But they both have 107.9 or 108 DPS. So they actually hit for the same amount of damage with Hammer of the Righteous. So it doesn't matter if you're using a fast weapon or a slow weapon, the DPS on the weapon is what matters. And caster weapons, like I have the Brutal Gladiator weapon, that thing hits for like 30 DPS, 39 DPS. So that's absolutely a weapon that you're going to want to throw away and get yourself a sword, Brutal Gladiator sword, Muramasa, Dragon Scale Encrusted Longblade. These are all really great options to have, because it's going to be a lot more dependent on having a weapon that actually has good DPS on it and not a spell power weapon.
So, okay, don't Pallies have like, I'm Pally dumb. I have a level 29 tweak Pally and a boosted Pally that I worked to level 60 from 58 and got confused and stopped. Don't they have like different stances and things where like when they hit, they refresh things? Like, would you want to have a faster weapon overall?
So
you're talking about a seal
application.
Oh, okay.
I think
seal application is typically
like you
based
can get
on
mana
weapon
back
speed.
from certain things. You can get
You're talking about
health
seal,
back from certain things. Like,
Seal of
does that
light,
really
seal of
matter?
wisdom.
You don't
if you're
really use them anymore.
Yeah.
Paladins don't have the mana problems that they had in the first 2 expansions.
because every time you block, you get 2% of your mana back, your maximum mana, with a Blessing of Sanctuary on.
Mana,
And then,
mana.
you
I
also
said
have
it
Divine
wrong.
Plea.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, you also have
So-
Divine Plea and Spiritual Attunement, 1 point at least.
Okay.
So the traditional Paladin build in Wrath takes 1 point in Spiritual Attunement,
Yep.
which will give you 5% of the effective healing that gets done to you and as mana to you. But yeah, more importantly, Zirene said the Blessing of Sanctuary gives you 2% mana back when you block, dodge, or parry, I believe. So for like AoE tanking, you are going to be full mana all the time, no questions asked. And then the other thing is one of the new spells that gets added to Paladin gives you, which is Divine Plea in Wrath, gives you mana back over time. I think it's like 25% of your max mana over 15 seconds. Prot Paladin has a talent that when you melee attack something, it will refresh the duration of Divine Plea. So you have this constant mini innervate on you while you're tanking.
Yeah, and keeping that up is pretty important because you also have a glyph that makes it give 3% damage reduction. So you want it up all the time and not have to like have it down and wait on cooldown. So yeah, in terms of like some of the biggest changes to Paladin, I think 2 of my personal favorites are you get a taunt that's not on GCD, that's ranged, does damage if the thing isn't targeting you, and it doesn't taunt all the other mobs to you too. So you can have a lot more finesse to Pally tank. One of the big things right now that prevents double Paladin tanking is if I run into a trash pack and I run into it and pick up everything. And this is why whenever somebody was telling me at the beginning of TBC, they're like, oh, we're going to use 2 Pallies in a Druid. I was like, you're never going to fucking use 2 Pallies. SSC is like the only exception where you could maybe do it, but you're going to move away from that because the Pallies have no finesse to their taunt in TBC.
Because it's just taunting whatever is on someone else.
If you have 4 things on you and I taunt off you, I taunt 3 of them. And I don't even really get to choose the 3 that I get. Right? I don't get to go 1, 2, and 3. So Pally taunt has no finesse to it, and it's a lot harder to navigate that situation with double Pally. There's many people who want to do double Pally in Wrath of Lich King. It's absolutely doable because you have access to more finesse via these taunts. And having 2 of them means 1 resists, you have another one. Right? And the cooldown is extremely low. I believe it's also the opener that you should be using on boss fights.
Yes.
Because when the boss isn't targeting you, I think it's called Hand of Reckoning, is just like the most snap damage and threat that you can do. So taunting the boss right away and dealing damage to them is your first action that you should be doing. That's my favorite thing about the changes to Paladin out of everything, is just having a taunt that feels usable off GCD, because currently Pally taunt is on GCD. So if I'm casting something, which I normally am, I have to wait. I have to finagle it too, because it's just really awkward to use. 15-second cooldown. It's just not very applicable to like real situations where you want to use a taunt to save somebody. So you can't have those reactions. And now this gives you that ability to do so. So it's much, much, much better.
The other thing is if Zirene is tanking 4 mobs and I'm tanking none as a prop paladin, he has plenty of mana to do whatever he wants in TBC, whereas I have none. Double prop paladin tanking is absolute cancer in the biggest sense of the word or phrase in TBC. In Wrath, it's no problem whatsoever.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think I know the answer to this, but what specs are viable in raids and dungeons? I'm assuming it's just all prot is the only thing that's viable. You don't have a shotgun spec you could do in dungeons or something like that. Or is there?
I don't think there's any weird. There's certainly not any weird out of left field specs that's drastically better for one situation or another. I just think you'll see small talent differences based on whatever. Not really too much of a different spec.
Yeah.
Um,
There really isn't. Like Prop Paladin isn't really that flexible in terms of your talents. You basically just take all of the good things in Prot and then you go down to Ret just a little bit. And some people think like Pursuit of Justice is like non-optional, it's mandatory type thing. And then I think it's Crusade after that still. But yeah, anyway, those talents are what you basically go after.
and Pursuit of Justice is?
It's a movement speed.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So it's 15% movement speed, which is better than the boot 8% movement speed. It's also you don't.
I'm sorry if I'm annoying.
Pursuit-
I'm just like I have to throw it out there for people listening.
Fine. Yeah, it's fine. Pursuit of Justice is 15% movement speed, whereas your boot enchant is 8%. If you spec Pursuit of Justice, you don't need to have the boot enchant that gives you run speed, so you can get a better.
Wait, it doesn't stack?
Boot enchant.
No.
Correct.
Oh, so you're saying that
one or the
for
other.
my twink, I don't have to have that on my boots? I don't have to have run speed?
If you have Pursuit of Justice, you do not. They do.
What
not
if I just do 2 of 3? Sorry, this is personal questions right here.
Whichever is stronger of the two. So 2 of 3 right now will give you 10% movement speed, whereas the boot enchant only gives 8%. So the 10% movement speed will trump your boot enchant.
So what if I do 1 of 3?
Then you'll get your boot enchant, which is stronger.
Just
I would
the
believe.
boot enchant. Wow, that sucks.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry.
Yeah.
In Wrath, it becomes a 2-point talent where the first point is 8%. So if you take 1 point in it, it's equal to your boots.
Okay, cool.
You'll always take 2.
I would say, and I'm probably guessing Zirene is going to say the same thing. The boot enchant of no movement speed and just a higher number of whatever stat it is, I think it's stamina, isn't that big of a deal compared to the movement speed boot enchant. So you probably want the movement speed boot enchant and no Pursuit of Justice in your talents, and instead get I'm guessing you don't want to have Pursuit of Justice talented, as you'd rather get movement speed on your boot. Or sorry,
no. I always want Pursuit of Justice because I'm rocket booting.
Right. That's
yeah.
Geez, I realized that about 5 or 10 seconds ago. My bad.
Because you have, you
basically
have to
any
have
of the boot
that
enchants.
Yeah.
Basically any of the boot enchants that aren't. Yeah, don't worry about it. It's like one of those like things where I had to shift it as well. Any of the boot enchants that aren't rocket boots you're literally getting a second pair of boots to wear when you're not rocket booting or it's not up, which will be a min-max thing. But yeah, Pursuit of Justice is like very, very good.
I literally had like a discussion with someone in chat during beta where we were talking about the best boots and shit. I was like, dude, it's run speed, period. Like being faster is always better, period. Whether you're range, DPS, blah, blah, blah. And then we were going on about it for a while. And then the dude goes, well, you're going to have rocket boots. So this conversation's null and void. I was like, dude, you're so right. It's like, this isn't even a conversation right now.
Yeah. Because the rocket boots also give crit, like just passively, right? So.
Yeah,
and
I mean, just for like so many different encounters, it's just huge, and just for speed of moving through the dungeon, it's such a short cooldown too. So,
and like I guess like one of the big things about Paladins right now is like you're like pretty big like AOE tanking. And one of the things that it struggles with is like I have threat on a lot of mobs, but it's dependent on them hitting me. Spellcasters, it always sucks to tank because I'm not getting holy shield charges on them. Like in Sunwell, the trash leading up to Caligos is very frustrating to tank. You're constantly using your sappers, MD sappers, just to try and hold aggro. You want to get in there fast, immediately, etc. In Wrath of the Lich King, one of my paladins is going to be named Hooters because there's just so much cleavage that they do. They have hammer And I think Paladin just kind of, a lot of people regard them as the best tanks in Wrath, and I don't think that's untrue. I think they very much so have like the highest DR from talents and glyphs together. I think they end up approaching something like 18%. Off the top of my head, they're a block class, so bosses that attack very quickly, you get a lot of value from block. It's one of the things where like you think of like ads on Muru where they attack main hand offhand. If I have block value, I'm getting twice as much block value out of that block. If it was something with a two-hander that hits me for 4K versus something that hits me for 2K, I get to double dip on block. So the faster something attacks or the more attacks it gives instead of big hits, the Paladin is what you want. So the DK likes those big hits because of Will of the Necropolis, negating big hit damage like we were talking about earlier with Zatar. And Paladins really excel when there's a lot of tiny hits that they can just continuously block. And it's the same thing with Warrior, but Paladins can actually tank the big bosses as well. So they kind of can do everything. And I think one of the things on private servers that Paladins became was they became your favorite tank's favorite tank, right? So if you have a main tank DK, Warrior, Druid, they don't, and even another DK, they don't really increase the durability of that Death Knight. But a Paladin combined with a DK makes that DK close to unkillable. You give them an aura that increases the amount that they get healed by. You can give them Divine Guardian, which is a 20% damage reduction. You can be in the same group as them. Also, there's only a few things in the game that are group wide still. There's only a few things. It's mostly totems, Monotide Totem, Healing Stream Totem, Draenei Racial, things like that. Divine Guardian, Divine Sacrifice is one of them. Divine Guardian is 20% damage reduction to the entire raid. Divine Sacrifice is you take 30% of the damage of your party. So if you put the prop Paladin in the same group as the DK, they can actually take 30% of their damage, give them 20% damage reduction, and then even use Hand of Sacrifice afterwards and reduce the damage they take as well and take that for them. So the Paladin has ways to increase the durability of another tank when they aren't tanking. And that's what the Paladin's biggest strength on private servers is they make your tank unkillable or even more unkillable. Or tank busting abilities, your Paladin, who's not tanking, actually has an effect over that too. And that's what the biggest strength of Paladin is when you're kind of combining them in a tank situation.
That is huge. But most importantly, for that whole spiel, do you have Mrs. Hooter's tabard picked out with orange and white yet?
Not yet.
They need
I gotta
orange and white, tabard. Talking to you, Blizzard. Maybe you can partner with Hooters. We get some wings. We get a tabard. Just saying. But okay, so correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like Paladin tanks are still the king of off tank, like AoE tanking, ads, yada yada yada. But can they main tank? And correct me if I'm wrong first before you talk about main tank.
They're kind of the kings of everything except Icy Touch, single target threat, and like magic damage. Like the two things that DKs do really well, and they're the kings of. Paladins aren't. But Paladins are incredibly good at single target, multi-target, surviving, not dying, increasing the durability of your raid. Divine Guardian is considered the best raid cooldown in the entire game because it's a shield wall for the entire raid. And you can, if you don't want to take the damage for your group, cancel aura half of that because it puts two buffs on you, one that makes you take your group's damage and one that gives everybody 20% damage reduction. And so you can just pop that ability and cancel the one that takes damage for people and just give everybody the shield wall.
And a Ret and a Holy could do the same thing, right?
Yes, if you talent into it, Holies a lot of time get it. Rets usually go Aura Mastery because they have to, if they go for Divine Guardian, I believe they have to give up a strength talent, or not a strength talent, the talent that increases their seal damage.
And just remind people what Divine, you said what it was, but just remind people now what Divine Guardian is.
Yeah, Divine Guardian is a cooldown. I can just pull it up here for a second. It's a 2-minute cooldown that 30% of all damage taken by party members is redirected to the Paladin up to 40% of his HP. And the damage, which reduces the Paladin below 20%, will break the effect. So you take your party's damage, 30% of their damage, up to a maximum of 40% of your health. You can also bubble and do this and take the damage for them, and it'll all hit the bubble.
Wow. Okay, I did not know the bubble part. Wow, that's huge.
You can bubble sack, you can bubble divine sacrifice. The divine guardian portion is the talented version of this, because the first one's a talent. This is like an improved talent of a talent, where your entire raid gets 20% damage reduction for 6 seconds, which is the main appeal to it. There's a smaller part on it that has to do with your sacred shield and the amount absorbed by it, but it's very, very minor. So the big appeal of this is 20% damage reduction to everybody in the entire raid for 6 seconds. And then the 30% of your group's damage is taken by you. And so a lot of the times, like a Ret Paladin or an H-Pal will pop this, and they want to cancel macro the second half of it where they take damage for people. They just want to give everyone the damage reduction. But if you're a prop paladin, you want to be in the same group as your other tank and take damage for them a lot of the times.
All right. Damn.
Yep.
So
there's also, go ahead.
Oh, no. Go.
No, I was just going to say that, like the paladins, like they don't really have, like, to answer your question from before, they really are the head honchos of tanking. The only reason that like Zatar and I think that warriors are so good is that they add more offense to an entire raid. Paladins actually in full clears right now are doing more damage than warriors unless those guys are arms prospect. So right now it feels like blood DK is incredibly low. Frost DK is like a step above that. Feral Druid is in there depending on how much they're main tanking. But prop paladin and prop warrior are the top two classes that do the most damage while tanking. Arms prot does the most by far, and then prop paladin is right under that. Regular shockwave warrior is below that. So paladin itself actually does a lot of damage. When you look at full clears, they do a substantial amount compared to other tanks. If you have a blood DK, frost DK, even a prot warrior, or feral druid that was main tanking, you can compare logs side by side. The prop paladin actually does a lot of damage. They don't feel very balanced, and that's why I think like prop warrior eventually will fall off into prop paladin taking that spot once things hit harder.
Okay, so both Corpse, do you have anything to add to this?
No, he seems to have added or done everything, said everything.
Sorry, man.
All right, so
it's all good.
So how does that transition into main tank? Because like we've talked about like DKs being main tanks, we've talked about warriors being main tanks. Like, can the paladin just do it all?
Yeah. Like people talk about running double paladin as their two tanks, and it's completely doable. They can help each other take damage. The finesse with the taunts is there.
Who do they have as?
They're really.
Oh, I guess like if you had a third tank, who do they have as their third tank? Like a DPS DK that switches over or something? Or
a druid. You're probably going to have a feral druid in your raid up until you feel like fury warriors are good enough that, because feral druids and fury warriors share the same buff, right? The 5% leader of the pack. So until fury warriors are good enough to dethrone a feral druid from that spot, then the feral druid will have it for pretty much all the time.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Do pally tanks, do they outshine the DKs in main tanking on high spell damage bosses?
No, but on really fast hitting bosses, I think they do. Like I think DK is the preferred Algalon tank because he dual wields, he hits hard. I'm trying to think.
He has specials in addition to that instant specials.
Yeah, and he has ways to like giga burst you down. So like Ardent Defender definitely gets value. I think DKs are also still very good though. It's so hard to tell like which one is better for fights because they both do very similar things. Like DK on like Syndragosa, where you don't really want to be meleeing her, is very big with Icy Touch threat. Paladin also can do that. Warrior's kind of SOL, like a Syndragosa warrior tank, because whenever you hit Syndragosa, she gives you like a stacking debuff that makes you take damage over time and just keeps going. A warrior's like killing themselves all the time, and DK is not, and Paladin can also do that. So they're very, very close.
Would you say anybody who runs a 25-man raid is crazy if they don't include a at least one pally tank?
I don't have one in my Nax speedrun comp.
You both said, eh.
I think
it's not required by any stretch of the imagination.
I think after Nax.
What about for casuals?
Yeah, I think for casuals, a DK Paladin is probably what you should be running from the beginning. Like, you're going to use them the entire. Like, here's the other thing too, right? Is if you're a casual guild, one of the biggest arguments that casuals will make against like my Prot Warrior, Feral Druid, main tank, off tank, Nax thing, when they don't know that I'm talking about speedruns, is they're just like, so if you're saying that like Warrior isn't going to be what you're going to use in Old War or ICC, why would you spend the time gearing it? Because it means you're going to start phase 2 having to gear up a new tank, right?
Wait, so phase 2 even Old War isn't good for Warrior?
I feel like it. I mean, Algalon is like something where I don't think Prot Warrior Feral Druid's going to fare very well. Like, you watch the outgoing damage of that fight, it's a dual wielding boss that is constantly doing an extra cleave on top of it. Plus, you want like raw armor values. You want things that can reduce damage. Warrior is not your boy for that one. Maybe Feral, maybe, but the block of a Paladin or the Will of the Necropolis from a Blood DK seems to be better.
It's basically a Brutalis with random elements to his burst rather than Brutalis, which is on a strict timer. It is not pretty.
Yeah.
See, I feel like if you were going to transition from the Warrior main tank, TOC would be where to do it, because basically
there's no trash.
You know?
Well, what I'm saying is, as somebody who speedruns, I'm just going to play whatever tank is considered best or what tank I think is meta. And based on like how well I do or how well I see other people doing and like figuring out which one it'll be, there's potential for me to not play Warrior in phase 2 at all. Right. And so for casual guilds, I would say you are for sure going to use Paladin and DK in the later phases. So if you want to integrate those players into your raid now and use them throughout the entire expansion, you should do that. So I would encourage guilds that are not speedrunners, that are not top level guilds, that to use a DK and to use a Paladin as their 2 main tanks. I would highly encourage that.
Dang it, Zirene, you're talking my guild out of not letting me main tank the completion raid, the raid that just wants to like knock out all the content. I'm supposed to main tank as the Warrior, and you're talking about of letting me do it.
I mean, I'm just calling it as I see it, man. It's just how it is, dude. Like,
I hope if the guild doesn't want to like bring it,
because what's going to happen to you after they give you all this gear and you tank for them, and then TOGC comes out? It's like, well, they're going to have to just have you. What are you going to do? They should have been funneling you Fury gear in the background, like. How are you going to transition? Or are you just going to be like, oh, I was playing DK on a different raid the whole time. Now I'm the main tank now. Because that's what I'm going to do, right? Is I'm going to be like, oh, doing splits and stuff. So they just rotate my character in based on which one's better.
I might do that. Okay.
That's what I'm planning to do.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah. I might, because I really want a main tank. Want a main tank. So I'm going to basically... Like, and it's the completion raid, not the competitive raid. Like, I'm DPS in that one, so like I'm willing to do whatever it takes, like to actually like be good and be able to do it for them throughout. So this is good information. I should have something waiting in the wings to like switch to, and I could maybe just switch from Prot Warrior to Pally too. Like, it doesn't have to be DK, right?
Yeah, because like Prot Warrior does not make it easier for your raid to clear the content. All it does is it will make it faster once all you're doing is pushing time. If you're trying to make it easier for you to kill stuff, DK, Paladin, those are the 2, absolutely. And that's why they're used on private servers, because things hit harder, have larger HP pools. So yeah, the Warrior is very much so a greedy tank. And speedrunning, you want to be greedy. It's not about like having things that save you from dying. It's how do I get as much damage as possible without dying? Right. Things that save you from dying, if it costs you any damage, then you don't do it.
So I should have an alt, either DK or Pally, side by side gearing in either G, DKPs, or Pug runs.
Splits, Pug runs. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think our completion run's going to do a split, but like I could be doing my own work on the outside, making sure that character's ready. All right, cool. You scared me there for a second.
Yeah. I guarantee you, like that's the thing, right? Is we don't know if there's a spot for Prot Warrior, Feral Druid in TOGC, ICC, in a raid that wants to be comfy. But we know for an absolute fact that Paladin and DK, there are spots for them if you want to be comfy. And those spots exist from the get-go. I cannot tell you how much easier it is to tank Patchwork as a Blood DK off tank than any of the other tanks I played. It is ridiculous how much damage you absorb. It's going to be so much easier to do things like Sartharian with the Blood DK. So there's a lot of things that become easier when you make it easier on yourself. So if you want to have that in the wings, I highly recommend it. Highly recommend.
Do you think anybody actually does Sarth without the Zerg strat?
Yeah. We did it as well. It was fun.
You did it for fun though. Do you think anybody does it like normally just because like it's not easier? So
it was more fun for sure though. Like it was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
It was actually so funny. Oro was just Oro, the enhancement shaman player. He was like actually making groups after we did it to just keep doing the actual 3 Drake legit. Right. He was like, let's just keep doing legit on beta. Just like, instead of zugging it down, it was the legit strat. So people had to learn that strat. It was actually a lot of fun.
Yeah. I mean,
were you able to Zerg both 10-man and 25?
I never did it on 10.
10 was a little harder. 10 was a little harder to do.
Really? Yeah. Okay.
10 was harder to Zug. I think the ratio of his HP to expected number of damage dealers is higher for 10-man. So you have to have more damage out of each individual person. Unless you're like, because you're going to be like one tanking, and then you're going to have one person kite the first Drake when it comes down. So you're already losing 1/10 of your potential damage, or 1/8. And you have to run like one healer. So you're like one healer, one tank, one kiter. So you really have like 7 damage dealers. Whereas when you do Sartharian 25-man, you have one tank, one kiter, and then you have like 2 healers. Yeah, it's 21 damage dealers.
And 1 heal hands.
Yeah, it's like that's a lot of damage dealers. Like the raid is 2.5 times larger, but you have 3 times more damage dealers. So it's the ratio gets really, really in favor of you for burning in 25-man. You can do it with suboptimal classes, and in 10 you can't really at the start.
Yeah, I mean, I like the way it worked out in Wrath, like basically when everybody was in like pretty much full Ulduar gear, every guild was getting down Sarth 3 Drakes, and it was all Zerg. Everybody that did it in the beginning didn't do Zerg. Like they did the full thing, and it was really a badge of honor. The Zerg is actually really easy if you put out enough DPS. Like it's crazy easy. And if you have someone,
Zerg's gonna be easier too. It's gonna be even easier because what's gonna happen is you don't have to wait in between pulls for lust. So you can just keep going over and over again.
Trying. Yeah.
Because that was the biggest thing with the Zug strat when we were doing it, is after every pull we had to wait like 3 minutes for lust to be back up, because that run back is pretty short, and we would just be like, okay, we're ready to go, and we had to wait, and then people would leave or whatever. Like filling always takes a long time. So yeah, it'll be even faster when you can just keep throwing yourself at the boss over and over and over again.
Yep. Okay, so we did cover gearing already, really, with the changes. So just glyphs and best professions we could probably skip to. Just glyphs and final thoughts.
Glyphs, there's Divine Plea, which Zirene already talked about. It's 3% damage reduction whenever you have that Divine Plea up, which is almost all the time. What else is there? There's
Hammer of the Righteous. Yeah.
which adds an extra target from 3 to 4 targets. It's like a cleave ability. What else is there? There's your standard taunt, has 8% higher hit chance. Oh, and Seal of Vengeance is the big one, which gives 10 expertise, while Seal of Vengeance, or I guess for Horde, Seal of Corruption, while they're active. And so I think Divine Plea and Seal of Vengeance are the important ones. The third one is kind of optional.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I was it was actually really interesting because I was of a slightly different opinion, was that Divine Plea and Hammer of the Righteous were the ones that were necessary. And then the 10 expertise from Vengeance was the one that I was flexing around a little bit.
Okay.
Because
certainly for AoE stuff, Hammer of the Righteous is absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
I guess for a single target and whatever.
Yeah. Because I'm mostly caring about like trash anyway, as an like, here I am. But any guide that I look at that's on Wowhead or anything like that, it's never for me. It's never for me. The glyphs they have are like never for me. Like I'm running Glyph of Devastate and Sunder, and no warrior on Wowhead's ever going to be caught dead with that because it's things for trash. Like you literally have glyphs for 3 GCDs on a boss, and then those 2 glyphs don't do anything, right? So that's my kind of flavor for.
Are you saying
what's up?
Are you saying Wowhead just for like warrior glyphs and
guides?
Tank glyphs?
I'm just saying guides in general.
What about Simonizes guides?
A lot of that stuff, he will actually put like a little asterisks next to it for trash and stuff. Like he actually does specific trash builds now, which I'm very happy about. But yeah, like Simonize is somebody who has like the same mentality, right? That trash damage does matter, but he does care about the people who want to just parse on bosses too. But for me, when it comes to like tanking and stuff, trash is usually the majority of my job. In Wrath, I understand that trash is very easy to tank and bosses should be too. But when it came to Seal of Vengeance, and I was getting so much expertise, even on the beta, I was actually using this and I was wasting half of it because I was human. I was wasting half of it for at least the soft cap, right? I was only getting like 3/4 value of the glyph because I was getting like the initial 5 was working for both parry and dodge, and then the next 5 was only working for 1 out of the 2 stats.
Right.
So I wasn't getting as much value out of it. So I started running around and trying other things. I tried a Glyph of Holy Wrath to reduce the cooldown by 15 seconds for AoE pulls, just to add it in as well as like another thing. The Glyph of Exorcism was one I tried for pull. I didn't really like that one too much. Righteous Defense was the other one for for increasing your hit chance with your 2 taunts by 8%. But you have 2 taunts, so it felt like it was kind of meh. Yeah. Don't ever take Glyph of Consecration. It's a trap.
Yep.
It's a massive trap. I hate that thing.
Wait,
yeah, I was basically between.
Yeah, just tell what Glyph of Consecration does.
So it increases the duration and cooldown of Consecration by 2 seconds from an 8-second duration and cooldown to a 10-second duration and cooldown. The thing is, Paladins have a very fixed rotation that relies on Consecration being pressed every 9 seconds. 9 seconds on the bat. So waiting an extra 1 second to push Consecrate because it now has a 10-second cooldown is murder on your DPS.
Yeah.
So it's actually like a literal unusable glyph.
It's a DPS loss to have that glyph equipped over an empty glyph slot. No. Well, Consecration, I think, maybe.
Like,
I'm not
depending on how
I wouldn't touch
spaced
it.
out the ads are.
Zirene and I don't play red.
I'm not sure off the top of my head.
I was just like, is it like literally something that should be deleted from the game if that's the case? Like that was just what I was curious.
I feel like Ret can use it, but I don't know. Basically, Paladins have 3 good glyphs. However, they're not all usable in each situation. So maybe you only care about 1 or 2 at any particular time.
I'm a crazy motherfucker sometimes too. Like for me, I was sitting there and I was like, well, what about Glyph of Salvation? When you cast Hand of Salve on yourself, it reduces your damage taken by 20%. I was like, that sounds like a good defensive to me. Lowers your threat, but nobody was like trying to catch me anyway. So it was like another thing that I could see that potentially being useful in the future on bosses, especially if you're in a guild where you feel like you need extra defensives. Because Hand of Salve is only really ever good if you're casting it on somebody else. But this gives it value casting it on yourself in a situation where you would normally just be like, nobody's close to me in threat. Why? Like, this is a useless ability. Sure, it like goes in one of your filler windows where you'd cast like Sacred Shield or something, but yeah.
Like for like niche situations where a boss is just really smacking you.
I could see things, but it really depends on how
I think there's going to be a lot of things with
I wouldn't even
glyphs,
say
right?
it's yeah, absolutely. I wouldn't even say it's really a niche situation. There are a lot of bosses that do tank buster abilities, and if you happen to reduce the damage of that tank buster by putting up salvation on yourself, you can always just cancel over the salvation. If you only need 2 seconds of the salvation buff, you're only losing a couple % of threat. It's not a big deal.
I'm sure you could use it precasted on pull too, but you lose like 2 seconds, 3 seconds of it or something. But yeah, it was just one that I was messing around with a little bit. I'm not sure exactly what I want as my last glyph, but I might go back to Vengeance because of the expertise always has value on bosses. But I found myself using Seal of Command on trash all the time, so
yes,
I wasn't quite sure.
Yeah,
Holy Wrath was kind of fun. I don't know how relevant it'll be in all the content though.
That's one thing important to notice. To note is that Seal of Command gets changed from a Seal of Lottery into a Cleave for prop paladins. So it is your de facto seal for AoE short-lived trash. It does a lot of cleave damage. And obviously, if you have Seal of Command active, you aren't getting the bonus from the glyph of Seal of Vengeance. So that glyph is completely worthless on trash that you use Seal of Command on.
Yeah. And somebody else pointed out that like pain suppression lowers your threat too, but it never like makes anybody rip threat off. That is true. That is true. But yeah, this would only be like if stuff was actually hitting really, really hard. I would ever mess around with that. Yeah, basically you have one glyph, Divine Plea, everybody agrees it's good. Hammer of Righteous and Vengeance are the other two. And then sometimes you might be able to deviate from those in the future based on if we figure out there's more things we should be like testing. The minor glyphs, you pretty much always want Glyph of Sense Undead. No reason to not take it. It's 1% increased damage against undead when you have Detect Undead on. So any of those glyphs that actually increases your output in minor glyphs, you should always take. And then Lay on Hands, I think, is the other one.
Reduces the cooldown on Lay on Hands, yeah.
Does it reduce the cooldown, or it just makes it not...
Reduce it by 5 minutes.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Lay on Hands doesn't take all your mana anymore.
I was just about to ask that if it changed.
Yeah, it did change.
Wait, what did it change to?
It doesn't take all your mana. I believe it full heals and then puts Forbearance.
I want to say it. I have to look this up. I want to say it full heals, takes all your mana, and then gives you mana back.
Does it still do that? Okay.
Let me read.
All right. While you read, I just want to point out, I love how the glyphs are changing the game. And I really do think like the hard modes starting in Ulduar are really gonna make different like you'll have the same classes and raids, but you'll have different classes doing a different job, taking different glyphs, and like there's no way to like talk about what you're gonna do differently, but basically what your specific raid is struggling with your specific comp. You're going to find different ways to make the fight easier according to your comp and your raid with glyphs. And I think it's a really neat thing. Like, I think it's going to be really neat.
Yeah.
I just threw that caveat
so it looks
in.
like Lay on Hands does not have any mana burning component to it anywhere. Okay, I did not know that.
Yep.
That's a big change from TBC then.
Yep. 15-minute cooldown when it's glyphed, so basically everybody has that. It's fantastic.
So yeah,
15 minutes from 60.
Yeah,
it's huge.
Yes, certainly paladins have a wide variety of glyphs that are decently useful depending on the situation. They can certainly change.
Yeah,
based on what you're doing.
One thing to note that Lay on Hands is one of the few spells that have been named so far that will not reset on boss death or on
encounter end or whatever it is. Yeah.
or on boss wipe. So that's one thing to note. You're not going to be able to just use that every fight if you're wiping. So, okay, right. Best professions, same.
Yep.
All right. Final thoughts.
As a Paladin lover, the fantasy that they currently fill in their niche, I think only gets stronger. And they are like the best tank for, like, if you were to take kind of just across the board averages of how good everything is at different things in the tanks, Paladin would probably have the highest score out of all the tanks in terms of if you measured their capability to do single target, AoE, supportive things, damage, right? If you took all these things into account, Paladin would have the highest score out of all the tanks by a good margin. I don't think any of the other tanks are as well rounded. Druid is probably like the closest, but they're one of those jack of all trades, master of none, whereas the Paladin is close to mastering all of them. And that's why I think the Paladin is just such a strong tank and relevant throughout all of Wrath of the Lich King. So if you're ever if you're wondering about what you should play, it's probably Paladin, because you will always be relevant if you're like worried about that in the slightest. DK is the other one, but I don't think they're as relevant during the beginning of the game.
Corpse?
Couldn't have said it better myself.
That's kind of what this pod has been. Like, you guys are like,
no
you've
kidding.
got so many big brains.
One thing
here.
I noticed just from screwing around on the beta with Paladin is they do an ass load of damage.
Yeah.
Compared to live.
And they already out damage every melee class in Mount Hyjal. So
you were talking about the strict Paladin rotation.
Yeah.
So I'm familiar with one rotation. What rotation are you talking about with that?
So there's a they call it 969 rotation.
969,
Basically you
okay.
have So there's 3 abilities that have what you can cast every 9 seconds. And then a pair of abilities that each have 6-second cooldowns. So you can just alternate a 9-second cooldown ability followed by a 6-second cooldown ability forever and ever. And it goes through you basically just alternate a 9-second cooldown ability with a 6-second cooldown ability, and you have enough abilities such that they will never you will always have one ability to hit, right?
Yeah. So it's like Judgment, Consecrate, and Holy Shield are the 3.
The 3 9-second abilities, and then you have Shielded Righteousness and Hammer the Righteous as your 2 6-second abilities.
Yeah. So what ends up happening is it's basically, I know they call it 969. I just kind of like to think of it as it's Hammer with a filler and then Shield in between, right? So because you have a 1.5 second GCD, you get to cast one thing between your 2 abilities when you alternate them. So you use Hammer, 1.5 seconds later you use a filler ability, one of your 3. Then you use Shield of the Righteous. Then you use a filler. Then you use Hammer. So it's Hammer, filler, Shield, filler, Hammer, filler, Shield, filler, right? That's all you do. So you'll be like Hammer, one of your 3, Shield, one of your 3, back to the start. And you just do that over and over again. And you're basically just putting abilities in the middle. Sometimes you can do things in that filler window that aren't those 9-second cooldowns, like Sacred Shield on yourself, just for a little mitigation, whatever you want to do in there. But you can skip them sometimes to do a utility thing like Salvation, Sacrifice, and whatnot. So I usually like to think of it more like that, where I'm using Hammer, Shield, but Hammer, filler, Shield, filler. And that's how I found it's an easier way for me to approach it.
All right, shit.
Yeah.
All right, so last and certainly least, the kings of main tanks in TBC Druid. I think we should just skip it. I mean, who cares, right?
I need to be at work in the morning. It's
damn. You guys gonna do the Druids like that, man?
I mean, am I wrong? But are these not the weakest tank?
I don't know if people play it enough right now. I think Druids are really excited about being hybrid. I'll change this next beta and play Druid a little bit and get more into it. But right now, a lot of it is just the discovery of how do cat Druids do more damage while being cat. So like they've started to do something called bear weaving, where on AoE packs, they start like, because you have an energy and you have rage, right? And the Furor talent was originally the thing that's like Wolf's Head Helm. When you shift into cat form, you get 40 energy, right?
I just saw something on this on Reddit with the Wolf Helm.
When you shift into cat form, you get 40 energy. When you shift into bear form, you get 10 rage. Wolf's Head Helm gave you an additional 20 energy, so every time you shifted into cat form, you got 60 energy right away. Furor changes to you can store up to 100 energy while being in a different form. So you can go bear form after you dump all of your energy, do some moves in bear while your energy is ticking in the background and recovering, then you swap back to cat and dump that energy again. So what cats are doing now is they're doing something called bear weaving, where they're dumping all of their cat energy, going bear, doing auto mangle lacerate. They're usually doing like 2 autos, a mangle, and a lacerate somewhere in there. But the idea is you keep 5 stacks of lacerate up the entire fight by going back to bear. So you're doing all of your cat DPS back to bear, lacerate 5 stack, keep it up, and then go back and forth.
And then lacerate is?
Lacerate is your it's basically the equivalent of like Sunder Armor for bears, where they wanted to stack it 5 times, but it's a little dot. It's a stacking dot. Does very little damage. But what were you going to do? You're going to sit in cat form, just pooling energy.
You lose auto attack damage from cat form, and in exchange you get bear auto attack DPS, which is lower, but you also get this lacerate dot.
Get the lacerate dot, which is increased by 30% because of mangle. And the dot is very strong. I think there's a talent that lets it crit as well that you take. So your rip and your lacerate can both have their ticks crit. And bear form, you also just slap a mangle in there too, in between, I think. So it's a mangle. It's not a maul. It's a mangle. You could do a swipe too if you really wanted to, if there was AoE stuff around. But yeah, cats also get swipe. So cat swipe is very good. Now you can AoE DPS as a cat. They're very happy about that. And their 51st talent is Berserk, which is like a cooldown that lets them mangle with no cooldown in bear. And it hits multiple targets, hits 3 targets. So the bear just starts mangle spamming on trash, just like as if they could cleave for a little bit. Right now, they're not that great from what I've seen. The cats are putting in all the effort they can to make themselves better. Right now, I think Omen of Clarity I think there were some changes or something that happened where Omen of Clarity is now like people are doing stuff where they're trying to proc Omen of Clarity with like instant cast wraths. People are going like, cats are crazy. Cats are crazy. Because you also have this talent where, go ahead.
Also at the same time, on private servers, Omen of Clarity worked way better than what we've seen on the beta. But I am going to throw this in here. Like you guys we've went through all the different questions throughout the different tank classes. I do think like Druid tank has been way less played on beta, and there isn't as much information. On top of that, all the Druid tanks from TBC are just excited to do cat damage in Wrath. So I'm sorry to do you wrong, bear tanks, but we are going to kind of summarize this section because it is getting late and we don't want to kill everybody. So I'm going to leave it up to you guys to talk about everything that you think needs to be talked about. I might ask a question if it confuses me or something, but I am going to turn it over to you, and then we will end the show.
All right, Corpse, go.
Main things. Druids get full crit immunity and talent, so you don't need to do some weird stuff that you did in TBC. All the defense and resilience gemming and gearing and for all that junk is just completely gone.
Why?
It makes Druid Well, they get 6% crit reduction through talents, and as Zirene pointed out before, you only need 5.6% total to be crit immune. So they get crit immune through talents, no gear needed.
Yep.
The other thing is, well, if you need to make some other tank class go DPS, they have to have another set of gear that doesn't have the defensive stats on it. Druids just use like old gear. Like, hey, if I'm tanking in TOC as a druid and I have my TOC gear as my main spec cat, my Ulduar cat gear just gets regemmed for stamina, and that becomes my bear gear. I don't need to steal extra loot from the raid in order to keep multiple sets of gear. I just have like lower quality gear be my tank gear. So that's one thing good about gearing up a feral to be both cat and bear, is that you don't need to have the same gear investment as it would take for the other tanks.
Question. So say you have that horrible situation where one of your tanks doesn't show up, like in TOC. Can your bear, who you've been having in the raid the whole time with his backup gear, do your off tank stuff?
Absolutely.
Okay, well that's a huge boon to have in your raid. Okay, sorry. Go.
I think that was most of what I had to say.
Off tanks, main tanks?
Insane off tank. I don't know how much they're going to main tank, but insane off tank, because they can do a lot of damage while not tanking. And when they are tank, it's funny because like a lot of people are excited about the bear weaving where it's cat into bear, but I can't really weave into cat while I'm tanking a boss. So bear tanking is still very boring apparently.
It's
where you're just
the same as TBC.
You're basically doing the same thing as TBC with like 1 or 2 extra buttons for cooldowns.
You
like,
can weave into cat though. Yeah. You can weave into cat.
And then you weave into human dead body on the ground after that. But
well, yeah, I was just gonna say our main tank when he first went druid from warrior, he literally died instantly, and the raid was trying to figure out what happened, and he had just changed to druid, and he had switched to cat like right during, and he instantly died. So you can do it, it's just not recommended.
I have accidentally unshifted into human form when popping an iron potion, but didn't shift me back into bear form immediately on Brutalis, and I lived to tell the tale.
Which is another big point
you were
to
using
bring
the
up.
macro, right?
Yeah, but I was on GCD, so it didn't instantly pull me back. So using that macro, you have to wait until you're off GCD to press the macro, and it'll instantly pop you back into bear. If you do it a split second early, or if you double click it, I think my problem was I double clicked it, it'll leave you out of bear form. So I popped the macro at like 100% health in bear form on Brutalis while tanking, and I found myself at 20% health in human form tanking.
That's another big change, guys.
Still have a lot of dodge in human as a druid.
Yeah, right.
That might be another big change to mention about druids.
What was that?
You were talking about potions.
Okay.
Using consumables,
in form. I had forgotten about that.
That's something we didn't mention that should probably be mentioned. I'm gonna let you guys as the experts do it though.
You don't have to be in human form to pop a potion, so it's not as big of a deal to like for cats now because they have pure, which stores energy anyway. But it's a big deal for druids where you were like, I want to pop a potion or an iron shield before this fight or a haste pop, but I'm at 70 rage. So now you get to keep your rage. You don't have to shift out.
And I mean, just imagine how funny it is for a bear to like lift up one of the 4 paws and just drink a pot. I mean, it's a funny image, right? Yeah, that was a huge one. I didn't even think about to mention with the changes. Like, there's something else, right, with Druid where you can do something else in form that you couldn't do prior?
You can bark skin.
Snapper, boots, bark skin.
I think you can do all of that stuff in bear form, I want to say. I may be wrong, but I think you can do most of it. You can definitely pop a bark skin in forms.
Yeah, that was a massive change. Actually making it a real cooldown for tanking.
One of the things from before one of you said that cats are like instant wrathing to try and proc Omen of whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was a main cat way back in the day. And I remember the theory crafting said that like the instant wrath damage and then shifting into cat is actually lower damage than your auto attack DPS in cat, so you didn't want to do that. However, also important to note is that Gift of the Wild is like a free Omen of Clarity proc, just because it's like it was something like it's a Omen of Clarity chance to proc on each of your 25 raid members. And so casting Gift of the Wild is like a guaranteed Omen of Clarity proc. So you would cast Gift of the Wild pre-pull as a cat.
Yeah, it wasn't working on beta to do that. Okay. But somebody was saying, I can check my feral chat right now.
Yeah. It was absolutely working in retail TBC. Or retail, sorry.
Omen proc rates were changed today from instants, including instant wrath, procking a lot more now. Gift of the Wild might make a comeback. Something they call flower shifting. I'm not sure what that is. I'll have them explain it to me.
Flower shifting.
I don't know what it means.
I don't know what that is. Hurricane has a chance on every tick to proc on private servers, but it's not the same here. So there were a lot of things on private servers that Omen of Clarity was just procking off. That's why like cats were so good on private servers, and they didn't have to bear weave, right? Bear weave is like the solution to Omen of Clarity isn't procking off stuff, because people would buff Gift of the Wild, or Gift of the Wild on the entire raid. They would do things like Hurricane. They would the flame cap. The flame cap would go on cat auto attacks and would give you
flame cap, the
consumable that makes it so your autos do like 45 damage or whatever.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, on private servers it procs Omen of Clarity. Oh, it was interesting, but it does not right now. So it's the cats are trying to find out what they need to do. In terms of bears, there just don't seem to be a lot of like pure bear players. So I'll have to get back to you once I've made the full transition, to be in a full bear player, because I don't really want to be one of those cat DPSers. I feel like I want to be the bear tank and see what that's like.
See, I think you're the opposite of every bear tank in TBC at the moment. They're all the third tank, and they're just like, okay, I'm talking about the bear third tanks that are forced to be tanks, like Rugs, and and like these people are like,
they're the cat that sometimes bears. I'm the bear that sometimes cats. Never wants to cat.
Cat DPS is incredibly fun in Wrath.
Yeah, that's what I hear.
And it pumps like.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, and like you're seeing beta at the moment, but just wait till Ulduar. I'm just saying, I don't know what they do after that, but I guess I only know what they do like on the patch that was actually Ulduar. So I don't know what changes they made in ICEC, but in Ulduar they freaking like I had to fight as a rogue to like keep up with this really good feral druid. So we'll just have to.
I don't remember exact specifics. I remember their tier 8 set bonus from Ulduar being very good, and their tier 10 bonuses from ICC being unreal. And obviously, as an armor pen stacking class, they have incredible scaling in those last two tiers of content in TOC and ICC.
Best professions.
Same. Yeah.
All right. Final thoughts on the druids. And druids, I am so sorry to do you rotten, but we just don't have enough information, and none of us have the like actual expertise to like give you anything. We can only like speculate, and the episodes run long. So I'm sorry. Sorry.
I mained feral cat in retail Wrath and was my guild's like third or fourth tank depending on situations. But that is my knowledge of that. Bear hasn't changed it too much from TBC to Wrath, so most of it is just it already applies.
You're just
from what
not
you know.
on the top anymore. Until proven wrong. Anybody who can actually do it, let me know. I'll have you on the pod and you can talk about it and you can tell everybody how wrong everybody else is, yada, yada.
It was a running joke during retail TBC that bears were the second best tank until, like, regardless of how the other tanks got buffed and nerfed, druids were always the second best tank until ICC when they just outscaled everyone. So like in Nax and Ulduar, DKs were in their release state, like broken as all hell. They got slightly nerfed for Ulduar and then nerfed again, and that caused them to be terrible. So in TOC, DKs got nerfed, but in that same patch, Paladins got overbuffed, and so they leapfrogged into number one. Then Paladins took a hit in ICC, and so that nerfed, like all the other tanks got nerfed, and druids just kept staying at the same power level.
Well, and you kind of like lead in there. I'm not going to hit number 7, but number 6, just as a final talking point here, I think it's kind of fun because all 3 of us did raid in the top 1% in Wrath.
Yeah, I wouldn't say I did.
Okay. Well, I know me and Zirene did. What are the differences? Like, I don't know tank differences because like I talked about earlier, like really literally my tanks knew what they were doing. I just was like really knew what I was doing rogue wise, and like really was like just pumping that. But like, what are the differences with tank meta back in the day as opposed to now?
I would say it's really depending on the fact that we're on the last patch of Wrath versus the carousel of tank balance changes before that in retail Wrath. So like we're gonna be in classic Wrath, we're gonna be tanking Sarth 3D with a probably a DK tank because they're so good against spells. But in retail TBC, you still use the DK tank. You still used a DK on Sarth, but oh my god, they were so much more powerful. What IBF or Icebound Fortitude is what a 3-minute cooldown now, whereas previously in the initial release date of DKs, it was a 1-minute cooldown. Yeah, like Bone Shield was a 1-minute cooldown that gave like 40% DR. Now it's a 2-minute cooldown that maybe I forget what it gives. Like gives like 20% maybe, but still the fact that Icebound Fortitude's cooldown was like cut in by a factor of 3. Like Vampiric Blood cooldown was cut in factor by half. Like DK's got a massive nerf from the initial release date of Wrath to the final state that we're getting re-released now. So that's what I think the big change is that you won't have changes or that meta. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say at the same time, so many other classes went through nerfs and buffs. Like the ending of Rogue with the way poisons work is crazy different from the start of Rogue with poisons, like where your poisons, your offhand poison, like if it's like, okay, it doesn't matter if it's your offhand or not, but you would put it on your offhand. Like if your deadly poison over procs like 5, it procs your other hand's poison, which you're gonna have like instant poison on your main hand. So like you're getting double poison procs. Like those types of things weren't even in initially, like in Wrath, and I'm sure there's tons of other different changes that like I don't even know about, because like basically like my knowledge from back in the day, Wrath was Rogue and a little bit of Destro Warlock. Like,
yeah. So another example is like the last couple patches of Wrath. We're talking like the last couple months of the expansion back in retail. They added that icy touch ridiculous threat scaling just because DKs were having so much problems with initial threat. But now we have that in classic Wrath for the entirety of the expansion. And now we see like, oh yeah, if you want to have really good threat as a tank, you just go on a blood DK and bam, icy touch.
Yep.
I wonder how many different strats for Sarth three Drakes were in original phase 1. Like, who was trying Unholy? Who was trying Frost? Who was trying Blood?
I think the strat was to be Unholy for 25 man because they had more powerful cooldowns, whereas Blood for 10 man because they had a higher quantity or better or lower cooldowns. Like, you didn't need the strength of cooldowns for 10 man because it hit slightly less hard. You just wanted a higher quantity of cooldown or better cooldown recovery rate. That's what I remember. So it's Unholy for 25, Blood for 10, for Sarth 3D specifically.
It's so interesting. Like, anybody watching on YouTube, let us know in the comments what you remember. Send in emails, like, because it's super interesting. Like, we are going to be playing a completely different game from the start of Wrath, and so all of us boomers that remember the way it was, it ain't gonna be the way it was before. So it's gonna be fun.
That includes me.
It includes me, like, includes all of us. It includes private server players. It's all different. That's what makes this exciting. Like, it is not figured out, so it's gonna be fun. Like, what made classic vanilla WoW completely figured out was the fact that they used private server data to make that build. What we have now is the actual build that they had back in the day, and the private servers are wrong. So it's interesting and fun and hilarious, and we're going to have a blast figuring it all out. And I think that's probably the coolest thing that I'm excited about for Wrath.
Although Blizzard still has to fix their bugs with this re-release version.
True.
So it's not necessarily the exact same.
No. Yeah,
right.
they're running on the Legion client, which is always going to cause problems.
Yeah, you're running on new hardware, blah, blah, blah.
I mean, they also have to recreate the entire rune system from the ground up because they reworked it in retail, right?
Yeah.
Like, you just have runes. You don't have runes of different types.
Yeah, I think that was Legion that made it all one color. And the retail rune system recharges a maximum of 3 runes, whereas the Wrath version recharges all 6 at once. So retail has a lot more flexibility in when DKs can use their runes, whereas the Wrath version of DK just says, if you have a rune, you better spend it right now.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. All right, well, yeah, this has been a banger, guys. Like, I probably should have split this up in 2 episodes. I'm sorry. I did not realize this was going to be so long. My bad.
Yeah, I mean, this is why I told you at the start when I was like, Crix, there's no way he's going to do all tanks in one podcast. I was like, that's not going to happen with me around, dude.
Hey,
and you think you're getting a fast tank thing?
Zai, I think I have given you proper reason, and I'm talking to you, Crix, and I'm talking to you, Sarth. You cannot do the tanks dirty. You need to have 4 separate episodes, maybe a mini episode for the Druids, unless you have a really smart person. But what you guys are doing with the deep dives are going to be looked into throughout the entirety of Wrath. And if this episode tells you anything, it's that you need 4 different episodes. Do not do the tanks wrong. Come on, Sarth. Come on, Crix. I'm talking to you. Clip it, chat. Get it done. Because we want it. I want it. I need more entertainment. So please do it. And that's gonna end us out. And I hope I helped you get 4 separate episodes, or at least 3.5.
Three. We can shoot for 3. It's fine. The ferals will take care of the rest.
And there's obviously a lot of stuff that we skipped over entirely, or maybe even glossed over. Yeah.
Like, I literally had to pull it along. You guys could have kept going in depth even more. And with a deep dive, I'm telling you, like, if someone's picking up, I know you YouTubers care about like views and everything. If someone's picking up tank, they're going to hit that one and they're going to really study it. They're going to watch it more than once. So it is worth your while to do these extra episodes. Hopefully, like, I hope Crix and Sarth don't kill me for this, but yeah. All right, guys, we are going to end out the show. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter at WC Reloaded. That's how you know when we're going live. That's the only place that I post for sure every time we are going live. We have different guests on all the time, so to know when we're going live that's really the only way to do it. You can also follow the Mash Those Buttons Network at the Mash Network. We want your WoW stories. We want you to write into us. We want any thought, question, or anything you have. If you just want to say thanks, it's cool too. Send those emails to wcrpodcast@gmail.com. If you'd like to join our Discord, which has been actually, like, it's crazy because it was nothing and now people are actually talking in it. If you'd like to join that, it's mash.gg/Discord. Definitely ping me if like you're asking me a direct question. I'm monitoring it more now, but it's still like I'm trying to increase the habit of looking at it, so that will help me for sure. How can you help the pod? Well, you can support us on Patreon. It's just like Patreon, search Warcraft Reloaded. Link will be in the show notes. It's the only place you're going to get the raw audio right after we record. So like on times like this where we record on Wednesday, you're going to get it like a good, like almost week earlier. So maybe, support us there. The other way you could help the pod, actually the best way, tell your guild. Your guild is huge. If you are the only person in your guild that listens to us, you have 24 other possible listeners that you could talk about our weird shenanigans, stupid stories. I mean, it could be a fun time. It's like watching a reality TV show. So tell your guild about it. Other ways, reviews on iTunes, stars on Spotify, reviews on bonusroll.gg help us too. All right. Oh, that was a lot to get through. Corpse, where can we find you?
Nowhere.
I mean, what if like a top end guild wants to recruit you as a tank? How do they get a hold of you?
I'm busy now. I'm playing on Benediction. Character names are Corpse and add a number at the end.
Yeah, it's Corpse 1, 2, 3, Corpse. 4. All the numbers spelled out, like literally Corpse, TWO, Corpse.
I've only had one person in my WoW career not understand my alt naming convention, and I feel sorry for them.
Yeah, I just feel like it'd be weird if I did Blazabob 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I'd get so confused. But I mean, you're smarter than me.
You need to shorten that a little bit to fit within the WoW naming character limit.
All right. Zirene, where can we find you?
You can find me on twitch.tv/Zirene, Zirene. I stream pretty much every day. I have 8 characters at level 70, and I pretty much raid every single day, like I said. I'm going to be playing all 4 tanks in Wrath, as well as a rogue, and I'll be streaming that the entire time. Once again, that's twitch.tv/Zirene, Zirene. You can also find me on Twitter at Zirene as well. So, yep. If you know Zirene, you can typically find me.
And we will definitely have the links in the show notes as well. And if you want to find me, you can find me on Twitter at Blazin_Bob. That's BLAZZIN_BOB. You can also find me streaming daily. It's like my job now at twitch.tv/BlazinBob. I do a lot of really boring stuff, but people come and hang out and we talk. And so if you have any questions or anything, or any people you want to suggest on the show, like come hang, because I'm there most days now. It's really weird starting streaming.
It's a really strange world. So
yeah. I mean, I like started just because I wanted every second of my hardcore challenge documented. I had streamed Overwatch prior with my Overwatch podcasts. You know, I didn't get like 7 viewers and 6 viewers and 15, stuff like that. But I did the hardcore thing, and I always had about, 8, 10. And then it just keeps growing. I guess if you just keep doing it, like it's really weird, but chat's a cheat, especially like not for Zirene, who knows more than chat, but for someone like me, chat teaches me a whole ton of shit. So
yeah, they just make me angry. When somebody says something and they're trying to correct me on something or tell me about something, I say, do you really want to bet your place in chat on that? Because I will prove you wrong right now, and I will ban people if they're wrong. If they teach me something, like, then great. But if they were wrong and they interjected and ruined everyone else's chat experience in my day, no. If they made me take time away to address the backseating comment that was wrong, like, you can backseat, but just be good at it. Don't backseat and be wrong. Double check yourself before you talk. Like,
see, well, luckily I'm small enough at the moment that most of the people that show up are just like podcast fans that want to help me. So usually, like, I get good info, but yeah, once you get bigger, you get the trolls in there, and then yeah, you have a whole different thing. But okay, we are getting out of here. Thank you guys so much. It was a super late pod. It's 2:20 in the morning for me. It's 12:20 in the morning for Zirene. I think it's 3:20 in the morning for Corpse.
No, I'm also Central Time with you. So
we're gonna get out of here, and we will see you next week.
All right.
Bye.
All right. See ya. Bye. Thanks for inviting me, man, and having me on.
Thank you very much for checking out Warcraft Reloaded podcast. Make sure to like and subscribe and hit that bell so you don't miss any future content.